to make sure are we ready to go? We live? All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Riverton. And the first meeting of the Riverton State Office Task Force. I look forward to doing some good work, both for the community of Riverton and something that'll be advantageous to the state as well. So I'm excited to undertake this work. Since I know that this is the first time, I don't know if everybody's met, and the first time that some people, including myself, have served on a task force. I think we'll start out by everybody giving just a quick introduction of themselves, if we would. I don't care. Maybe we'll go ahead and start on the far end.
I'm Curtis Moffett. I'm the warden with the Wyoming Honor Farm here in Riverton.
Jack Morey, Deputy State Engineer, State Engineer's Office.
Jerry Vincent, Director of the State Construction Department.
Larry Hicks, I represent Senate District 11, which is all of Carbon County and about 2/3 of Sweetwater County.
Amber Oakley, House District 55, and I represent Riverton.
Ogden Driscoll, Senate District 1, all of Cook County, about northern half of Campbell County, and pretty good chunk of Weston County up to the Osage, and President of the Senate.
Good morning. My name is Ed Heimer. I'm with the Department of Family Services. I'm the administrator for field operations.
Senator Tim Salazar, Senate District 26, Riverton.
I'm Lloyd Larson. I represent House District 54 in Lander.
All right, and with that, we'll get started. Or do we need to do a roll call? Let's do a roll call.
Morning, members of the committee. Senator Driscoll.
Present.
Senator Salazar.
Here.
Representative Larson. Here. Representative Nicholas.
Yeah. You gotta get behind the bar to get the credit.
Mr. Heimer.
Here.
Mr. Moffett.
Here.
Mr. Morey.
Here.
Mr. Waldock. Mr. Vincent. Here. Co-chairman Hicks.
Here.
Chairman Oakley.
Here,
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Madam Chairman.
thank you. So I think with that, we will jump right in. If you want to give us the background and the information that you're going to present for us and introduce yourself, Mr. Richards.
Good morning, members of the task force. My name is Don Richards. I'm a budget and fiscal administrator for the Legislative Service Office. Nice to meet several of you. Your task force will be co-staffed by Catherine Camerati, who is also a member of the budget and fiscal staff of LSO. And as needed, Tamara Reveley, counsel for the Legislative Service Office, will also be attending remotely or attending your meetings should the task force have any legal issues to discuss. As by way of background, this task force was created by Section 9 of the 2023 Capital Construction Bill. That was Senate File 146 from this most recent general session, which became Chapter 187. This task force is comprised of 6 legislators, 4 appointees of the governor, and by law, the director of the State Construction Department, Mr. Vincent. By way of background, there was an appropriation of $50,000 for members of the legislative committee. So the 6 legislators will be paid through LSO like a normal legislative committee. The 5 of you from the executive branch, Department of Corrections, Department of Family Services, DCI, State Engineer, and State Construction Department will need to handle your own compensation, per diem, and travel expenses. The role of the committee was significantly amended through a governor's veto. The legislature had left, so there was no opportunity for modification or override of those vetoes. Principally, the staffing changed, the name changed. The amount appropriated changed from $12.5 million to $2.5 million. And the responsibilities of this task force also changed all through governor line item vetoes. As the bill states now, and this appears in Appendix A of my introduction memo, this task force will receive and request information as necessary from the State Construction Department. You are charged with monitoring and planning of a Riverton state office. The governor struck the word building throughout. He just leaves it as Riverton State Office. The law requires you, when necessary or prudent, to make recommendation to the State Construction Department regarding important aspects of the Riverton State Office, to provide reports to JAC annually, not later than November 1st of each year of the existence of the task force. And the task force is set to sunset in 2028. And finally, those recommendations may be included in your reports to JAC. If I could pause there and just say how that practically works is there is currently $2.5 million appropriated and available to the SBC and specifically the State Construction Department to expend for purposes of a Riverton state office. If that is insufficient, or if you need more time or more flexibility with those funds, those recommendations could be made to the Joint Appropriations Committee. I acknowledge that the law says November 1st. Practically speaking, those recommendations need to be made no later than January if you want it to be included in the markup of next year's capital construction bill. In addition, the State Building Commission will meet 3 times before next session. They will meet on July 21st, they will meet on October 11th, and they will meet in January 2024 at a date that has not yet been set. So they meet quarterly. There will be 3 opportunities to present any recommendations to the State Building Commission if you wish to engage with the members of that statewide commission as to location of a facility, purchase of a facility, purchase of land, construction of a facility, or anything of that nature. Also, by way of background, there are 2 recent task forces that are similar, not identical, to this task force that I wanted to at least refresh folks' memory. And obviously, Representative Nicholas and Representative Larson are well, very familiar with one of them as they served on the Health Facilities Task Force. But the first example I would give you is the State Office Building Task Force for the Casper Office Building, now referred to as the Thyra Thompson Building. That has some distinguishing features, but a lot of similarities with the efforts before you. One distinguishing feature is the executive branch prepared a study prior to the appointment of a task force. So in 2015, if we could rewind, the executive branch was charged with preparing a study of the agencies that are housed or were housed in Casper and what their needs were. And at that time, there was no task force to receive the study. It was just a legislative requirement. In that same year, the legislature started to set aside money, or at least try to set aside money. And for those of you who were in the legislature at that time, that was the 2015 informally termed tranches. So in the event that investment income met certain thresholds, money would be set aside for the Casper State Office Building. Well, it turns out, just by way of history, there were no excess investment incomes that year and no money was set aside. And the following year, the formal task force for Casper was created. And the legislature began to set aside a variety of different revenue sources in earnest. Some money you might recall was discretionary AML money. Some money was related to investment income. And there was purchase of land at that time and authority to conduct a level 1 study in 2016. In 2018, the legislature appropriated more money to the account and proceeded with a level 2 and level 3 study. And then ultimately, the legislature appropriated a total of $53 million for all of the studies, the construction, and the acquisition of property. All of that money was not spent. And while it has not happened yet, the legislature has planned for the reversion of excess funds. I expect that might be in the neighborhood of $2 million. At least there's a little over $2 million today that is unexpended. There might be some follow-up work that needs to be done. The legislature this year directed any reversions to be deposited in the State Building Commission's contingency account. So that will build up that account. That account, for members who are not familiar with it, can be used for property acquisition, emergency repairs of any state facilities, as well as level 1 and level 2 studies. I know that's a lot of history and background, but basically there was a 7-year process from level 1 acquisition of property, finding the funds, actual construction, and then last year legislative committee meetings began and executive branch agencies resided in that building. I can see there might be some interest in questions, so I'll pause there before moving to the healthcare task force.
Madam Chairman.
Vice
Mr.
Chairman,
Richards, do you know what the current balance is? And maybe Jerry knows any SBC contingency fund?
Mr. Chairman, I do. And it's $6.7 million roughly as of the last quarter. And when I say roughly, I mean I'm rounding. That is before any deposit of this maybe $2.2 million. So it could approach 8.5 or so. I should also mention there's another account that's often discussed along with the SBC contingency account, and that's the SBC Flex account. That is primarily used for inflationary increases for projects that have been approved. The balance of that account, again, at the last quarterly meeting was $15.7 million. So 2 different accounts, a little bit different purposes, and combined about $22 million of cash.
Madam Chairman, follow up on those, Dawn. And again, if and maybe Jerry can answer this, but either one of you is the expenditures of those funds, I'm assuming are up to the discretion of the SBC, probably with consultation of the governor. It doesn't require further legislative authorization for the expenditures of those funds. So how do those 2 accounts operate? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Mr. Chairman, and obviously I'll pause here at the end and let Director Vincent either provide additional color or correct me. But you're exactly right. No additional legislative action is necessary. I believe that the director, Mr. Vincent, has the ability to use up to $200,000 or $300,000, $200,000 without a formal vote for, emergency repairs or something. They don't have to have a formal public meeting, but any amount in excess of that would require a majority vote of the 5 members of the State Building Commission. I would also mention that although I indicated somewhere around $22 million of cash resides in that account, there's no question that's correct. However, there may be informally earmarked projects for potential acquisitions or potential repairs that are being anticipated but have not yet been acted upon.
Representative Larson.
So thank you, Madam Chairman. So Dawn, just to refresh my memory on the recent efforts we made legislatively to that flex account, that 15.7 million, I think was part of a legislative effort this session to address anticipated inflation impacts on those projects that were currently underway or were out to contract. Am I recalling that accurately?
Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, I think I would characterize it as over and above So the Joint Appropriations Committee made a separate appropriation for all existing construction projects for inflationary purposes around 20%. You also appropriated an inflationary cost for all new projects. So that's the second pot of money. And then this I would characterize as the third backstop for even higher inflationary increases beyond those prior two appropriations.
Did you, Director Vincent, did you have comment?
No, you covered that very well. I will look into it with SAO and our accounting people. We plan on reverting 3.5 million instead of 2 million. So maybe some of it's hung up because we haven't finished all of our warranty period.
Any further questions, comment? All right, if you want to continue, Mr. Richards.
Madam Chairman, that was a brief history of the Casper task force. It's similar to the activities here in that you have multiple agencies. You didn't have necessarily identified property. There were discussions of renovation or where to build. So a lot of those parallels might be aligned with this task force. The Health Facilities Task Force was created for the renovation of the Wyoming State Hospital in Evanston and the Wyoming Life Resource Center just outside of Lander. Realistically, I don't think that facility or that task force looked at acquisition of new facilities. They knew what was going to be done. They knew where it was likely going to be done, but there was still substantive involvement about how to proceed, what contractor to choose, what the final product would look like. By way of background, in 2014, the task force was created, and they were charged not necessarily with level 1 or level 2 studies, but rather to look at the mission of those Department of Health facilities. And actually, it was broader than just those 2 facilities, their missions and needs. In 2015, this next year, the legislature authorized level 1 and level 2 studies. In 2016, level 1 was completed, and there was also design work for both the state hospital and Life Resource Center. And in 2017, 4 years after the original mission statement, the legislature released funds finally for purposes of construction. Throughout that effort, and Representative Larson and Representative Nicholas were heavily involved, that task force created a working group that used monthly updates and worked with members of SPC when necessary to provide them progress reports and also hear any change orders from the state construction department. That working group really served as a liaison with the State Building Commission and the state construction department. There are some differences with this task force. You have been appropriated $2.5 million. Unlike the health facilities and unlike the Casper, there is no account. There is no standalone account for a Riverton exercise. And I would argue that that's probably was unnecessary the way the legislation was originally crafted, because there was a standalone appropriation arguably sufficient to proceed with construction and acquisition or acquisition of property. There are certainly agency impacts, as you will hear today. A number of agencies lease space, and you will hear a lot of specific details, and we will track all of the FTE. But just stepping back, and not to steal Catherine's thunder, I like to break things down pretty simply. And in Riverton, there are 50 employees that work for state government that work in leased space, not state-owned space. Okay, technically it's 49, but let's just make it easy. 50 people. You're paying, or the state is paying, $300,000 per year in rent. And again, I'm rounding, it might be 308, but 50 people, $300,000, and the state is currently renting or leasing 25,000 square feet. So that's kind of what Riverton's current situation is. When you step over to Lander, just because we're in fair proximity, the numbers are as follows. There are 25 FTE, in 12,000 square feet at a cost of $250,000 per year of rent. So 25 employees, 12,000 square feet, and $250,000 in rent. Again, I am rounding a bit. You will look at some of the materials that we have provided you, and the numbers for Lander are a little different, and there's good reason for that. Two significant things are happening this year. One of them actually occurred in the month of April. First of all, the state Parks and Cultural Resources purchased a building. So in the state reports, they show up as leasing. And in fact, they have purchased that building and are now in state-owned space as of April. My summary of 25 people, 250,000 and 12,000 square feet takes into account that purchase. Secondly, the Department of Family Services is currently leasing space in Lander. However, the legislature appropriated funds to finish the occupation of the Emerson building on the campus of the Wyoming Life Resource Center. So that agency will vacate its lease space in the coming months, and they will no longer have lease space in the community.
Representative Larson.
So Madam Chairman, if we could just go back a little bit, just I think, and I had asked Dawn to make sure again that I'm accurate on that. I think the State Health Facility Task Force, when we reviewed the mission of all of those facilities, that included the domiciliary in Buffalo, and was one of the priority recommendations to be reconstructed or built new, but that again started in the 2015 type era, and when we maybe even before that, and we elected to pull that one out. We moved forward with the two that we completed, State Hospital Life Resource Center, and now we're back to, we have funded money to build the domiciliary. But that's all part of the work of that task force. So am I recalling that accurately, Dawn?
Mr. Chairman, you are, yeah.
And then, Dawn, my understanding, you mentioned the work group, and this might be important for this task force, is right now that we had a legislative task force for the state health facility. Once that project was funded, it shifted responsibility really over to the executive branch. And the executive branch had the official oversight of that building. Legislation, the legislature wanted to stay involved with that. And we constructed the work group specifically designed. At that time, we started out with Director Schmidt, who was the assistant director for the Department of Health, to be chairman of the work group, to where the executive branch had the majority of votes on that to maintain their primacy, if you will, or their jurisdiction, and the legislative members had the minority votes. But it was upon recommendation from an advice from LSO that we structure that to where we don't cross over that line of overstepping legislative responsibility or authority into the executive authority. And there, I don't know that we would see it here, but there is a possibility. But am I recalling that correct, Don?
Mr. Richards.
Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, that is correct. That was a little bit later stages of the task force. You'll see this task force is made up of a majority of legislators. But to that point, I did have one last comment to make, primarily for the legislators, but this is a joint task force. So you have somewhat different rules than particularly the members of or prior members of the Joint Appropriations Committee are used to working with. So as a joint task force, you are subject to the executive branch rules on public records, public meetings, as opposed to the legislative rules on public records and public meetings, which are different. So just something to keep in mind as this committee works out. In addition, I would say that through the governor's veto, your LSO staff will be staffing this task force. The legislature directed the executive branch to task force that or to staff the task force, and the governor modified that via his vetoes.
Representative Larson.
And I would also just point out the original chairman of that State Health Facility Task Force was Chairman Bebout, who's here with us today.
If you want to continue, Mr. Richards.
Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks, and I will turn it over to Catherine to walk through some of
Okay, any further questions? Representative Larson?
Madam Chairman, if I could just go back and make sure that I and the public maybe who are watching are understanding that. So we've got the legislators here, Mr. Richards, and then the four appointees from the governor are Mr. Moffett from the Department of Corrections and Mr. Morey from the State Engineer's Office, Mr. Heimer, who is with Department of Family Services, and Mr. Vincent, who's Director for the State Construction Department. Those are the government appointees. Is that correct?
Mr. Richards?
Madam Chair, I think you missed Mr. Waldock with the, excuse me, Division of Criminal Investigation. Yes.
So we might invite him to join us up here.
It's ready for you, right?
Welcome, Mr.
But that's
Waldock.
correct. And then my other question, Madam Chairman, to Mr. Richards is, as we get through here, go through this process, and we start looking at level 1, level 2 studies, and we look at the intent, and I believe this is in Director Vincent's presentation, but some of the actions and some of the work that this task force do really are what we would do in a level 1
Mr. Richards?
study. Is that fair and may be considered as such when completed?
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, that is correct. In my view, you're assessing the needs of the state. You're assessing the needs of each individual agency, not only their square footage, but maintenance needs, parking needs, access to the public, all sorts of those things which are typical of a level 1 study. Building on Representative Larson's comments, I should also mention, just for background of the executive branch folks on this task force does not have the ability to sponsor legislation. If the task force members desired to, there are some options available to you. One option would be to recommend legislation or an amendment. Primarily, that recommendation would go, I would envision, to the Joint Appropriations Committee. It's possible that you could make that recommendation to the Management Council if you so desired. You could also prevail upon the legislative members who could sponsor individual legislation with either all 6 of them or some subset of all 6 of them. But this group here, because it is made up of non-legislators, does not have the ability to sponsor legislation. You can make recommendations, but not sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Any further questions? All right, thank you. We'll welcome Ms. Catherine Camerati. Good morning. If you would introduce yourself to the committee task force.
Good morning, members of the Riverton Task Force. Catherine Camerati, Associate Fiscal Analyst, LSO. I have prepared a very high-level summary of various leasing, state ownership, and employment statistics for certain municipalities in Fremont County. That would be Riverton, Lander, and Shoshone. So, absolutely. So slide 2 Table 1, Riverton lease space, is an analysis of state leases from information provided by the Department of Administration and Information and YDOT. And YDOT separately contracts for leasing, but I've included it in the table here. There are roughly 10 leases in Riverton. The total annual rent is about 308.5 thousand. Total square feet is about 25,000 and total number of employees is 49. The average cost per square foot being about 14. The next slide.
Representative Larson. Please continue, Ms. Cameron.
Of course, Madam Chairwoman. The next slide, slide 3. Riverton state-owned space is an analysis of state-owned buildings in Riverton based on information provided by DANI. There are a total of 7 state-owned buildings, but you'll see that Agency 40 Game and Fish isn't really a building, but rather 2 employees that permanently telework. So more accurately, we own about 6 buildings in Riverton. And there are an estimated number of about 131 employees, with the majority being in Agency 80, the Department of Corrections for the Honor Farm, and in the Department of Transportation.
Representative Larson.
So Catherine, on that, just noteworthy is, so then Workforce Services has a building that's owned, I think that's, I can't remember the square footage of that, down on Fremont. And then on the previous page, we've got them in lease space as well. And if for the task force's information, I think the reason for that is the property that's owned by the state is not ADA accessible. So for the VOC rehab, they really needed, so we've got that agency that's bifurcated because the building wasn't adequate to meet the needs for the clientele that they served. Do I have that accurate?
Ms. Camerati.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, I'm not aware of the nuances of the building. Potentially Mr. Richards.
Maybe Mr. Wolf.
Good morning. If you'd briefly introduce yourself before answering the question.
Sure. Jason Wolf, Administrator with the Department of Workforce Services. Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, your assessment of that is correct. We do lease about 1,080 square foot space for our 2 vocational rehab counselors, simply because the owned space that we have on Fremont, restrooms aren't really accessible via a wheelchair, and just difficult to get around in that space.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
It looks like we've got some questions. Director Vincent.
Yes, I have one. I don't know if it's going to be enough percentage to matter, but I was able to sit through all the facility plan meetings this year with all the agencies. And I remember a number of them saying they have lease space that it's federally funded. So I didn't know what that breakout is, or if it's enough of a dollar amount to matter when we're looking at what the overall savings would be to come into one place instead of multiple out there. So it might not be enough to matter, but maybe we can look into that down the road.
Representative Larson.
So what happens, Director Vincent or somebody that's smart, if we own the building and we're housing to that point, are we able to capture federal dollars to help for lease space on a state-owned facility?
Mr. Richards.
Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, that is correct. So there is a what's referred to as a state allocation process that is delayed a couple of years, 2 years, but we are able to essentially charge the federal government rent for any personnel they have in state-owned facilities. In some cases, not all, in some cases, it is actually advantageous to the state to put federally funded employees, particularly in new construction, because it has not been depreciated down and you're able to recapture higher amounts from the federal government.
President Driscoll.
Madam Chairman, how long have you had the building? Sorry.
Mr. Wolf, if you'll return.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe the building was built in 1961.
Madam Chairman, follow up, and condition and value of the building if we were going to do something
Mr. Wolf.
rough. And I know you're not a real estate guy, but you live here.
Madam Chairman, Senator Driscoll, the condition is fair, I would say. I mean, we do the facilities planning with Director Vincent's shop annually. I think we just did some windows and stuff over the past 5 years. So we've kept it in pretty decent shape. I don't really know the value. But it works for what we use it for. But it is in, could use some upgrades.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Camerati, if you want to continue.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, slide 4, table 3 is a personnel comparison between a survey administered by the Department of Administration Information to agencies and a query from the state position database administered by the Human Resources Division of.
Representative Larson.
So just to make sure that we're not confusing something, Catherine, if I may, we have 2 points on here. On the state owned, we've got Department of Corrections, which is out at the Honor Farm. And on the least, we have Department of Corrections, but I believe that's parole. Is that accurate? And that's why there's a difference there. Just wanting to make sure the task force understands that.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, that would be correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to continue, Ms. Camerati.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman. So the state position database administered by the Human Resources Division is essentially the payroll database, and the judicial branch is not included in this analysis. We performed it to kind of highlight maybe some of the discrepancies between the state database and the agency survey to provide another source of information. And it's not necessarily that the information provided is incorrect, but some people could be living in Lander and commuting to Riverton, or living in Riverton and commuting somewhere else. So the largest discrepancies you'll see is maybe in agency 49, the Department of Family Services, but some of them will just be off by a couple of positions. And that's just to give kind of a wider idea of how many people are working in those locations. Moving on to slide 5. Tables 4 and 5 are Lander and Shoshone lease space, which is similar to the style we saw earlier. And the same analysis was performed from information from DA&I. Lander has a total of 7 leases, but Mr. Richards did steal a bit of my thunder. Roughly by the end of the summer, we'll have 6 leases there as DFS is moving from lease space to the Emerson building on campus. Lander has a total annual rent of about 361.8 thousand, total square feet, 18.3 thousand, and the average cost is 17.8, and without the DFS, it'll be 253.5 total rent and a total lease space of about 12.3. And Shoshone just has 1 agency, which is State Parks and Cultural Resources, with a total annual rent of 52,000, square footage 39.6, and about $1 per square foot. And there are roughly 10 people in that space for leasing, and Lander has about 45.
Representative Larson.
And again, just for the edification of the task force, that property is in Lander at the state parks bought is if I understand correct, is the trails grooming facility. It's the old BLM building that they've been leasing for a number of years, but that's the purpose of the building. That's where they store and do all of their construction maintenance on the trails and snow trail grooming.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, that would be accurate. Slide 6. This is a leasing comparison for municipalities across the state. On table 6 on the left side is a ranking of the top 12 municipalities based on the amount of square footage or total square feet leased. And table 7 on the right is the top 12 for the average costs per square foot per facility for the amount of square feet. And Riverton ranks as number 6 for the state when it comes to amount of square footage leased, and ranks as number 21 for the average cost.
Question? Do you have a question, Director?
I'm sorry, but I was trying to go back in time. I was looking for that right spot. The building that Jason was referring to, when we start to hit a 0.30 on an FCI facility condition index, we start looking at major components to replace. At 4.0, we take a deeper dive. At 0.60, we need to abandon the building. It's just going to be too costly. That building is currently sitting at 0.59 out of a 0.60.
Okay.
Thank you, Director. Any further questions or comments before we continue? Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Could I ask the director to give us those numbers again? So you talked about at 2, is it 2 point that you look and 5 point that you do something? This is a, give me those decimal points and stuff again, would you?
Sure. To both sides, Madam Chair, to both sides of our house, our school side and our construction management division side, 0.20 and under is still that new building warranty. There might be something that goes wrong, but generally considered routine maintenance. 0.30, we start looking at components, the hot water heaters, things that are starting to shut down, not function correctly. When you start to get to 0.40, you probably have roof leaks that are patchable, but you got to keep an eye on it, those kind of things. And as you're gravitating, you're monitoring its replacement value versus what you're spending in major maintenance dollars. And do you do repair? Do you do replace? Do you do patch? And you start to get over 0.40, 0.45, and we start to analyze those things. And the sites do a good job analyzing them as well. When you start to hit the 0.50, we're supposed to be bringing it in there to us to SBC, JAC, whoever we can have listen and say, if it is a 2 biennium to make something happen, possibly 3, that's 4 to 6 years out, you're at a 0.50, you're going to hit 0.60 during that time frame. So we try to lay it out for you in advance so you can make appropriation decisions in a timely manner. And that building, I will say this, admirably, I heard from most of the agencies that if they made a request 15, 20 years ago and were denied, they just went back to what they were doing. And to a person, they said, we just make do. And make do is admirable when you're trying to save money, but the balloon payment comes at some point in time where you need a whole new building now, just not 2 or 3 million to do some work on it. So the facility we just were talking about is at a 0.59 right now. All the concrete is fall, the railings are falling out, the parking lot is end of life. It's nowhere near ADA compliant. And that's even if it has proper drainage. You start to add all that up and it adds onto the score pretty quickly. So if that's too much information, I apologize.
Thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Representative Larson. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and continue, Ms. Camerati.
Madam Chairwoman, the next 3 slides are state personnel comparisons using that payroll database. This includes AWAC positions for Lander, Riverton, and Shoshone. It does not include the judicial branch personnel in any of these figures. So figure B is more of a geographical example of the position distribution. There are an estimated 787 employees total for this area, about 588 in Lander, 182 in Riverton, and 17 in Shoshone. Figures B and C break out Lander and Shoshone by agency. In Lander, the vast majority of the employees, at 386, is in the Department of Health, and the rest of the agencies have about 10 to 50 employees. And Shoshone has about 17 total, with the majority being in the state parks and cultural resources.
Madam Chairman,
Representative Larson.
did we show the livestock board having any lease space, or they just work out of their home?
Ms. Camerati?
Those are brand inspectors, I believe, aren't they? No lease space. Okay, no lease space.
All right, go ahead and continue.
Madam Chairwoman, no, I did not see any lease space for the livestock board. The last slide is just a very quick reference slide. In the above slides, you'll find the more completed list of those lease spacings, but this is just a quick reference that you can look back to for Fremont County.
Madam Chairman, just real quick, back on slide 7, and it's noted in a couple of places here with the asterisk and then the red that none of this includes judicial branch employees, and just a question as to that, are they not included, or is there a special reason that we have not included judicial branch employees?
Ms. Camerati?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Hicks, we did not include judicial branch employees because there was kind of a reason for anonymity for how many people were in those positions. Some of them were undercover.
President Driscoll?
So
Wait, hold on, Representative Larson.
I will hold on.
President Driscoll?
Madam Chairman, we get that. I mean, what condition are their facilities in that they're in? Because that's Casper office building. Once again, we house part of that. Has anyone looked at the condition of their facilities as far as the judicial end?
Ms. Camerati?
Madam Chairwoman, President Driscoll, I think that would be a question better addressed for Department of Corrections.
Madam Chairman.
Representative Larson?
So I think our judicial branches we're looking at is our district and circuit court judges and their staff. And so they're in the courthouse and then in our justice center here in Riverton. And so the need for using, and my question is, are there any other judicial branch employees that are outside of those two? I think the spies are all under the Attorney General's office up there in the hinterlands by the airport, but I think the judicial branch is all very transparent.
And to weigh in, and I don't know that it matters, but the Justice Center here in Riverton is a bit, fairly new building, I think 2015, and is state owned.
That was my question. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments before we continue? Ms. Camerati?
Madam Chairwoman, I just had the quick reference slide, and then if there were any further questions for me.
Anything further? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, task force. According to the agenda right now, it mentions public comment, but I don't know unless, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but unless anybody wants to speak right now, excuse me, I think we will just go into the meat here of talking to the agencies and starting to gather that information. Yes, we will definitely hear from Senator and President Bebop. Speaker, I go through the welcome, Mr. Rebout, if you will introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, President Driscoll, Chairman Nicholas of the JAC. It's good to be with you here today. And as you're going through the history of all of these task forces, going back in time, I was fortunate enough to be very much involved in those. And the way we set it up and what we did really made a lot of sense for the citizens of Wyoming and for the state that did in terms of the office space and how we did that. And there were three different ways. And I recall all the discussions we had about that, what we did with the health, with the state hospital and the WLRC. And of course, Chairman Nicholas and Representative Larson were a big part of that, where that might not have been done on time, on budget. Then what we did with the Casper office building started very similar with a discussion like this. And we recognized the importance of trying to unify and have everything in one place and try to make it more efficient for the state of Wyoming. And then I go clear back to when I was in the House years and years ago when we talked about the fire academy and the state electrical inspector. And at that particular time, they were located in Cheyenne. And I remember the discussion about that, where if they were electrical inspector going out to the state of Wyoming, they would spend 2 days traveling or sometimes 2.5 days. Of course, it was on I-80, they didn't go. And what we talked about was moving them to a central location to better serve the citizens of Wyoming. That's exactly what we did. And of course, there was some pushback from Laramie County because you were taking people out of Cheyenne. But at the end of the day, the legislature and back then the governor recognized that it was the best thing to do for the citizen of Wyoming. And when I look at what's going on with the Riverton office, I won't say building, but the Riverton office, it makes a lot of sense to me to have that same kind of discussion. You have to obviously look at the amount of square footage, the cost and those kind of things, which is what the task force is doing. But what I hope that you're able to do and put together is that to serve the citizens of Wyoming, it makes a lot of sense that some of the functions now that come out of Cheyenne, I'm not going to get into specifics, but we know what they might be, would better serve Wyoming in a central location. Well, I'm a little prejudiced because it's Riverton. Representative Nicholas is smiling when I say that, but I am, but I really look at the bigger picture and and I often say, and I've said it before, it's the state of Wyoming and in reference to Cheyenne, everything shouldn't be in Cheyenne. There's a lot of functions obviously that should be there, and Mr. Vincent knows all those, and the number of employees in the state of Wyoming is, I don't know, 7,000, and by far and large, the biggest percentage of those are in Cheyenne where they should be. But obviously there's certain functions that we can better serve the state of Wyoming in different places. And Riverton makes a lot of sense. You saw the cost per square foot. You look at the location central, and we now have air service here, all kinds of reasons for people to consider moving some of these functions to Riverton. It's not going to be done overnight. And I would hope that this task force, after you've listened to all the testimony, will come back with some recommendation to the JAC, to the governor's office, that we ought to look further and get started right away to facilitate what we need in Riverton. And I'm really amazed at the governor's veto. I haven't had a chance to visit with him. I don't, maybe some of you have, why he did what he did to the legislative work. I thought the legislature was very, very prudent in how they approached this and what they did with the legislation when it left the body and approved by both the Senate and the House. And then now to have that pretty much gutted, I'm not sure what his rationale was, but he's going to have to be talked to. Obviously, we have to have the executive branch involved, but it only makes good sense to have these things done in Riverton. And so I'm all on board. I think it's the right thing to do for Wyoming. It's certainly going to help the community of Riverton. We're stressed right now. We're agriculture based, mineral based, and it's tough right now in our community. So obviously this is going to help as well. And the last thing I will talk about is we did have a pretty sizable state function in Riverton about 20 years ago, where the Department of Education had part of their workforce set in Riverton in the old Tonkin building. It was like 25 employees, and they might have done assessment, curriculum, I'm not sure what they did, but it really worked. I remember talking to the school districts about it, and they said, it's so good that you have something like that in the center of the state. And then it got involved in politics, and different people got elected to different positions, and they shut it down, which in my opinion was a mistake. The legislature obviously couldn't be involved in that, or we would have been involved in it because we didn't want to see that happen. So there's a lot of positives to move forward, make a favorable recommendation to do some of these things in Riverton. look at the overall picture, and Mr. Vincent can talk about, I like that 0.59 or 5.9. I mean, you don't say 6.0 because then there's all kind of different ramifications, but there's things we need to do, and Riverton is a great place for it. So I'm just happy to be here, and it's good to be back and sort of in the swing of things and look at all of you up there. It's a little different sitting out here than being up there, but I'm kind of comfortable sitting out here right now. So with that, Madam Chairman, members of the committee or task force, excuse me, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator Bebout. Those are great comments, and I think really important for us to keep and, you know, focus on the overall goals that we're looking at here. And I think those were, I think that was a great way to kick off. Who has questions for Senator Bebout? Looks like Co-Chairman Hicks.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, and I'm just sitting here as Senator Bebout articulated well that sometimes what get lost is, and much of the discussion in the Senate was around, you know, how much per square foot and all this stuff. You know, is it really justified and stuff? But I think we never need to lose focus, and I appreciate that you bring it up. It is really about service to the people of the state of Wyoming and making government accessible to the state, to the people of the state of Wyoming. And so I thank you for that. I think that ought to be a central focus as we move forward with any discussion on this. It's about a service component. I often see a number of people, even in my area, that much closer than Riverton to Cheyenne, still talk about the difficulties of making it to Cheyenne and stuff. And so a central location just makes an absolute lot of sense from a standpoint of service and the people that the government was established to do. So thank you for that. And I just think that needs to be a central focus as we move forward.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Senator Hicks. And as I look at the makeup of this task force, the people here can make that kind of a decision. And I think you're on the right track if you consider that in that light. And I get back to all the things we talked about. And when we did them, you know, the Casper, the state hospital, all of these with the state capitol, all the things we did over the last 4, 5, 6 years that we spent a lot of time and money on. We were at the initial start of it, there was heavy criticism from certain people. What are you doing? You don't know what's going on, so on and so forth. But now they're saying, wow, you really knew what you were doing. So I look at this as a very similar situation. There's going to be criticism. It's going to be a tough lift for you. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to do the right thing. And that is to have a favorable consideration for doing what Senator Hicks talks about to better serve the people of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Director Vincent.
I just want to say thank you for your comments on Senator Hicks, because, you know, as SCD, and I know some of the other agencies are similar, we're in a corner of Cheyenne and service. We're going to Evanston, to Yellowstone, all the way across Sheridan and to the upper corner. So you don't show in your numbers SCD in this Riverton facility, but we're going to want to pencil in 1 or 2, whether it's here or Casper. You know, our project managers are 5 to 9 hours windshield time to get anywhere they need to go, and it also adds up in vehicles and miles and gas and hotels and whatever it does. So it's and that's not even the weather, right? So we want to be over this part of the town as part of the state as well. So thank you.
President Driscoll.
Madam Chairman, Director Vincent, did you just make a pitch to move your agency to the new office building?
If I did, everybody's who's listening, if my agency is upset right now. We
Yeah,
want to
pretty
place it.
compelling.
No, sir. We want it, but we in order to service, we would want a desk somewhere over here. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments for Senator Bebout? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good luck with your deliberation. And are you going to have another meeting back in Riverton, or there's going to be others that you're going to be conducting?
We are having further meetings. We're going to be in Riverton for these. That's accurate, right? Yes, that's correct.
Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
All right, unless there's any further public comment at this juncture, we will move to agencies. We all have the agenda in front of us, and I will just go in that order unless, again, if anybody needs to leave or anything, I don't think there's any, I don't think this has to be set in stone. But are you ready then? We will start with Mr. Heimer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we want to have even the people, members of the task force still go to the desk, Mr. Richards?
Madam Chair, that's entirely your discretion, but that's typically how it would work.
Okay, so if you're okay with that, Mr. Heimer, if you'd go ahead and go to the table to testify, if you will. Good morning. If you both would introduce yourself to the task force and to everyone in the audience and watching.
Again, good morning. My name is Ed Heimer. I'm the administrator for the Department of Family Services for Field Operations. And I'll let Ms. Neely introduce herself.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Jennifer Neely. I'm with the Department of Family Services. I serve as a district manager, and part of the area that I'm able to work with is the Fremont County area.
All right, thank you. So if you, Mr. Heimer, go ahead. Representative Larson.
But Mrs. Neely, because this might be part of this conversation as we look at field services, but you also take in Lincoln County and Teton County and Sublette County as well as under your supervision.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, yes, that's correct. It's North Lincoln County, Teton County, Sublette County, and then Fremont County.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Heimer, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The Department of Family Services operates 2 field offices in Fremont County. We have one in Riverton and one in Lander. The Riverton staff actually relocated to its current location in 2017. And we have found that location to be completely adequate, meets the needs of our clients and our staff. And especially given the proximity of the building to schools and law enforcement and other community services. The Lander DFS office has been working with state construction and the Wyoming Department of Health to renovate a building on the Wyoming Life Resource Center campus, the Emerson building. We're in a process of relocating. We're hoping to get into that. It looks like maybe September, October of this year. So that's really some very good news. I think the new facility is going to be quite nice. It's going to offer, as there was some discussion around centralization, we hope to use Lander Riverton, and we have in the past actually Riverton for our training needs since it's centrally located. And we brought our staff in here historically for several years now. We plan to do that again in the Lander office. The renovation of that building offers us a large room to do training. It's very nice. I think it's really going to help us. It'll cut down on our costs for travel for our staff. Every year we offer at least 2 core trainings for our new workers. So we're excited about that.
Mr. Heimer, can you tell us what building it is in Riverton, the location of that and the square footage that you're currently using, as well as what you're going to be using at the Life Resource Center in Lander?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I was going to get to that with the square footage and the cost. Before I do that, though, I'd like to just in terms of the number of employees we have in both Riverton and the Lander offices, we have a total of 17 in the Lander office, and we have, we have actually 20, we have total of 40, the number of employees combined. We have 17 in the Lander office, and we have 23 in the Riverton field office. We do offer telework for our employees. It really depends on each employee. We don't require it, but in each office, quite a few of our employees do telework. In terms of the Riverton field, the location is 877 North 8th Street, Riverton. It's the U.S. Energy Corp building. Our monthly cost is about $11,347. The per square footage rate is 10,500 square feet. And we pay the cost of that square footage at $12.97. I think at the last, you could see that we were, I think, 23rd or 20th, somewhere in the cost per square foot is quite reasonable in the Riverton office. It's a very good accommodation in the Riverton office. And as far as the lander, currently we are located at 201 North 4th Street, Lander, Wyoming. Our future location is going to be again up at the Life Resource Center, the Emerson Building, with the renovation. Our current, we are right now in a month-to-month lease in our Lander building, just in terms of preparation for the move. We have square footage in the Lander office of 6,000 square foot. And our cost per square foot in Lander is $17.88 per square foot. Did I miss anything? You want to add anything to those offices? Ms. Neely supervises both of those offices, does a great job for us. So I probably have left something out, I'm sure.
Madam Chairman.
Representative Larson.
So, and maybe this is directed to Mrs. Neely with her and oversight of these. So tell us when you looked for lease space here in Riverton and you ended up in your current location, what that did or any impacts, if any, to the clients you serve and your ability for staff to serve them problems.
Ms. Neely.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, I'm really glad that you asked that question. One of the things that our previous location was just a place that we were outgrowing. It didn't accommodate ADA needs. There were some issues similarly to what we heard about workforce services experiencing, just sort of dated buildings. And when we were able to move into the new space, we really learned that our employee turnover rate decreased. Our incidents with angry clients kind of reduced. It seems like customer satisfaction went up a little bit. So I think just having surroundings that included some green space and some well-lit rooms and some open space really provided a nicer setting for the services we provide.
Yes, Representative Larson.
So it looks like you've got about 10,000 on 11,000 square feet. So that in that building, that's probably one floor of that building, the top floor. As I go over and have visited your agency, it appears the accommodations are exceptional, very nice, but storage perhaps is not. And it appears that although it's an improvement, there are still some limitations and some things that you guys could use.
Ms. Neely.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, yes, the building itself is fabulous. We really are excited about being in there. There are some minor changes we could make to help accommodate some of the needs that we have specific to the services we provide.
Do you, Madam Chairman, and do you have, thank you, Madam Chairman, do you currently have adequate office space on that floor? They're big offices, but do you have all the office space you need on that floor?
Ms. Neely.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, there are some spaces that we could take more advantage of. Some of the larger open spaces that were, I think, originally intended for kind of group gatherings might be better served to be individual offices. The nature of the services we provide really requires a lot of private space for workers to be talking with folks about very sensitive issues. And so having some of those spaces that are open currently be put into more private workspaces would probably be really helpful.
All right, any further questions? Oh, Co-Chairman Hicks.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, so Mr. Heimer, I'm assuming your office and yourself are located in Cheyenne.
Mr. Hyman.
Madam Chairperson Oakley, Senator Hicks, actually, I am not located in Cheyenne. My location is in Cody.
So, yeah, Mr. Chairman, so can you tell me the nature of why you're located in Cheyenne, or I mean in Cody?
Mr. Hammer?
I've, I travel around the state, do a lot of office visits. Wasn't critical that I be in Cheyenne. As a matter of fact, it's much better that I can travel around to all the field offices, make sure things or whatever their needs are, things like that. So I was the district manager in that District 5 area for 20 some years. And when I took this position, I was allowed to remain in Cody.
So, Mr. Heimer, I'm really glad you're here today. So do you feel in any way that it's impaired your ability to conduct and do your job residing in Cody versus being in Cheyenne?
Mr. Hammer?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Hicks. That's not a trick question. No, yeah. I'm really, yes, it's very good that I live where I live. I know my community. I know quite a bit of the state, working in the state for as long as I have. I know the areas and, talking about Riverton and Fremont County as central location really it has a lot of impact for our staff. We have offices, direct service offices across the state. It's really important for us to serve those communities in each community. And when we do bring people together, like for instance, with training, the Fremont County area is really is our best bang for the buck.
So, Madam Chairman, and the reason I bring this line of questioning up, because I think Mr. Heimer absolutely represents a glaring example of why we need to look a little broader. A lot of the statistical data that we've reviewed this morning was what's here today. Yeah, we need a 21st century, 22nd century workforce. And one of the things that we know is the ability to attract and retain people now. A lot of it revolves around where they get to work from. In fact, I just had a conversation with the executive branch, the governor and some of his staff 2 days ago. We now have state employees working from 25 different states in the United States. And so when we talk about this facility and a building and an opportunity here, I think you're a perfect example is not all things have to be located as far as where people can work from today. And having that option and that choice is to look at a range of things may actually facilitate the ability to attract and retain good people as yourself, given that flexibility. So as we get into these discussions, I think sometimes I don't want to get to the point that we overlook the fact. I think Mr. Vincent said, to better serve people. So it'll be easy to just say, what's the needs today for the exact agencies? But what we want to do is create an opportunity to attract and retain people from all over. If they can function from an office in Riverton versus Cheyenne, or even in another city around the state of Wyoming, that opportunity exists. I know Senator Driscoll or President Driscoll's had conversations with the director of the Department of Corrections. And I think that, I'll let him talk to that, but it illustrates the fact that there's amenities for whatever they be here that some people are really attracted to in this part of the state, that we need to facilitate that opportunity. So I would just ask the president to kind of share his thoughts and his discussions on this broader issue of not just looking at how many employees are here in Fremont County.
Madam Chairman, before we do that, it almost appears to me that the task force is getting ahead of itself. Let's listen to the comments of the agencies, then we'll have time after, let these guys get on the road, and then let's have this conversation on this amongst the task force. This is a time to ask questions.
I hear you, Representative Larson. We'll try to stay on task and keep it tight. Do you have any comment that you'd like to make, President Driscoll?
Madam Chairman, I'll wait. We're good. I'll listen to it. And I think the agencies are going to speak well for themselves back to being ahead, Representative Larson. I think the case speaks for itself as the agencies go.
So any further questions or
Madam,
I see any further? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Heimer.
Yeah, Madam Chairperson, if I could just respond just quickly, might be helpful, at least from the Department of Family Services experience coming through COVID. And the work that I think we were required or tried to adjust. I think if you look back at what 2020 and you're looking at 2023 now, we've experienced a lot of turnover for a lot of different reasons. I think the department has seen a tremendous transition and allowing its staff now because of technology. And I think everybody in this room probably understands now that so many more people are so much more comfortable with video conferencing, that we are way more efficient than we ever have been. And so this, the bricks and mortar has really changed drastically, I think, for us as an agency in 3 or 4 years. And I think it's going to continue to get better. We're learning a lot of things. Telework doesn't solve everything. It creates other problems that we need to adjust to, but we're hopeful. I think our turnover rate hopefully will come down. I think if we can give employees flexibility where they live, they'll be much happier employees, and a happier employee does a better job. So, I mean, that was my response to Senator Hicks, but we found a lot of benefit thus far to the changes that have had really through what I think is COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Heimer. Thank you, Ms. Chairman Nicholas.
I do have a question. So with regards, and you mentioned earlier, you have employees who work remotely here in town and also in Lander. The question would then be, do you have employees who, for example, live remotely in Casper and yet provide services here versus staying within the region or the locale? In other words, is the opportunity that you just described to work remotely, what's the map of that look like? Can you work in Cheyenne remotely and provide services here, or does remote mean you're just working from home, but you want them here so you can have one-on-one contact? Can you just kind of put that into perspective for us?
Mr. Heimer.
Chairperson Oakley, Senator Nicholas. I don't know. I apologize. I don't know the type. That's a good question. I can tell you that we have several staff that we allow to work and live all across the state. A lot of our licensing is done remotely. We have staff that actually do provide direct services and do that statewide. Live outside of Cheyenne. We try to make the geography work. We all know Wyoming's a big state, a lot of distance, and we sometimes forget how long it takes to get places. So we try to be strategic, but we do have quite a few employees actually between our licensing staff and some of our investigative staff. Even our direct service staff, like I just said, that do, and our administrative staff actually out of the Cheyenne office now. We're looking at placing some of those or allowing some of those folks to live in other communities and still do their administrative job that traditionally would have been in Cheyenne. That's really what I would say has improved dramatically in the last couple of years.
Chairman. Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Heimer. Ms. Neely.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Waldock. If you would introduce yourself and tell us who you're with and proceed with testimony.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the task force. My name is Matt Waldock. I'm a commander with the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. I oversee the Riverton office here in Riverton, and I live in Casper. Talking specifically about Wyoming DCI's facility here in in Riverton. We currently occupy a standalone building that was built specifically for our needs by the city of Riverton. We've leased that space for the last 10 years. I know on the documents that were provided to me, it says we have 3,600 square feet. But in reality, we have 5,445 square feet, 1,825 square feet of office area, and 2,775 square feet of garage space that we utilize. The total building square footprint would be 5,445 square feet. The shop area of that building has a large 16-foot electronically actuated vehicle door and a standard size man door on the north side. The garage is utilized to search vehicles in inclement weather, storage of large evidence items that we might come across, whether that be vehicles, whatever it may be. It could be a mattress. It could be a lot of different things. So we do use that for that purpose. It also has a lot in the shop area. There's a server room, which occupies our servers, as well as a storage room and a locker room with a shower and toilet facilities. The office area comprised of 7 offices with a conference room, evidence room, a copier room, an interview room that has a separate entrance from the outside. So they're not going through our building. It has a separate entrance to that. The evidence room has a separate secured and monitored access. So it has key card access as well as audio and video capabilities in that as well. The evidence room is also equipped with a part-time negative pressure ventilation system for dealing with substances like fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin, whatever it may be, that can be turned on and off with a control module. The entire facility is key card accessed, video surveillance on all sides of our building. The west portion of the facility hosts a large secured parking lot that has a 6-foot or maybe even be an 8-foot chain link fence with a barbed wire on the top of that fence that's lockable when we leave at night and while we're there during the day. As I said, the building's owned by the city of Riverton. It was built specifically for our needs. Prior to being in that building, we were actually in the Riverton Police Department for many, many years. And as the Riverton law enforcement, staffing grew, we grew out of that space. And so we've been in there for the past 10 years. Our current annual lease rate is $38,000 a year, and with a 5-year total of approximately $192,000. Some of the things I wanted to highlight is some of the needs we would have to have, or we would like to have for the facility. We currently have 3 full-time DCI agents in that building. We have 2 task force officers in that building, one from the Fremont County Sheriff's Office and one from the Riverton Police Department. We also have a part-time BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs investigator in that building, as well as an unfilled Wyoming Highway Patrol Task Force officer that we haven't had for probably about close to a year due to staffing issues with the Highway Patrol. The office would need a secure evidence facility for, I think, obvious reasons. That facility can't have windows and the room has to have, we would like to have reinforced walls on the top, bottom, and sides, as well as a part-time or a full-time negative ventilation system, again, for dealing with fentanyl, that type of substances. It would have to be audio and video recorded like the one that we're currently in I think for obvious reasons as well. The office itself, if we were to be in the state building, we would need our own security system, specifically swipe in, swipe out security system. Again, I think for obvious reasons, for evidence and for sensitive issues, the items that might be in that facility. A lot of our offices have bullet resistant in the entry area, have bullet resistant glass, as well as we just recently installed bullet resistant sheetrock in our office in Casper to finish out that wall because it was just sheetrock and then a bulletproof window. So it was great for about this big. And so that was something that we would like to have. We do host, our members of our Riverton and our Cody offices, which comprise our Northwest enforcement team, are all members of the FBI Safe Trails Task Force to help them with issues out on the Wind River Indian Reservation. So we often hold meetings, briefings for search warrants, which sometimes comprise 10, 15 people, depending on the size of search warrant we're doing, as well as trainings. So a conference room would be helpful, not a part-time conference room, but a somewhat full-time conference room. We would prefer to have a separate entrance for our agents for the purpose of meeting and bringing in confidential informants. We deal with confidential informants on a daily basis and bring them into a building that houses other state offices similar to probation and parole, the Department of Family Services, any type of other social services. Oftentimes, those are the people that we're investigating, not all the time, but oftentimes it does. So it does create problems when we're bringing in confidential informants to further those investigations if they had happened to cross paths or something to that effect. Be preferable, and I again don't know how the building is going to be set up, but oftentimes, like our building we currently occupy, secure parking. Oftentimes we do seize vehicles. And if we seize vehicles, they need to be in a secure location that's not accessible by the owner of the car or possibly a co-conspirator in those cases. We would need a fairly large storage unit or storage area. Stuff like clandestine laboratories that we deal with on occasion. The breadth of the items that we have to have for those are they just take up a lot of space. As well as our law enforcement equipment, vests, rifles, guns, that type of thing. They do take up quite a bit of space. It would be preferable that we had access at least to shower and bathroom facilities. Oftentimes we go into residences that, whether it be a clandestine laboratory, whether it be a home or apartment or whatever it may be that has a lot of methamphetamine or fentanyl, it's preferable that we like to shower before we go home to our family. So showers would be optimal for us as well. Also, bathroom facilities, we often take urinalysis samples, not only from suspects on occasion, but we do also take them from officers that were involved in officer-involved shootings on occasion. And that some of our offices around the state don't have bathroom facilities in them. So we have to take whoever it may be, whether it be a suspect or an officer. And if it's a public bathroom facility, we would have to basically block the bathroom off to other people in that facility so we could obtain the sample. So that's just a list of items and a little brief history on our building in Riverton. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Waldock. I've got a question for you. Are there other DCI offices around the state that are not standalone that share space with other, agencies? And if so, if you can, give some examples of that and how that works.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the task force, yes, we do co-locate with other offices in office buildings. I can tell you that I believe the only building that we occupy that is state-owned is our headquarters in Cheyenne, which is on College Boulevard, the combined labs facility. All our other offices are leased space, so, and it's kind of a mix. Some of them are standalone buildings, some of them are not. I can go through every office. It's going to take me a little bit to go through those, but we share space in Cody. We have a standalone facility in Sheridan and as well as Gillette. Our Casper office is a shared facility. Our Cheyenne office is a standalone facility. Our Laramie office, we share and get free space from the Laramie County or the Laramie Police Department. We're co-located with them. Our Rollins office is a shared space. Our Rock Springs office is a shared space. Our Evanston office is a co-located with the Sheriff's Department and Police Department in Evanston. Our Afton office is a shared location with the Sheriff's Office, I believe. And our Riverton office is obviously a standalone building, and I don't think I'm missing any, but that's just a quick rundown of them.
Thank you, Mr. Waldock. And like using the Casper as an example, what other agencies do you co-locate with?
The only state agency that we co-locate with there is the Gaming Commission is there. The Wyoming Attorney General's office went into the new office building. And when I say the Wyoming Attorney General's office, the attorneys and the paralegals went into the new state office building. There is EP, I think EPA is in there. I know there's a federal facility that's a federal agency that's just going in there right now. They're redoing the area of it. There's a testing facility there, like taking your nursing exam or something to that effect is in there. And the Wyoming Petroleum Association was in there for a long time. I don't know if they still are or not, but I don't believe they are.
Co-Chairman Hicks.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Waldock, specifically to this area and stuff, and you had mentioned you have a one BI agent co-located with you in your current facility here, but is there other federal law enforcement agencies that you interface with here in this area that have a presence? And what would be the opportunity of looking at these co-located federal facilities, and is if this task force moves forward, to find any specific needs that they may have that would be above and beyond the needs of DCI? Again, and it gets back to a little bit what Don Richards says, if we can co-locate with some of our federal counterparts, and particularly in law enforcement, BAI, FBI, all these other agencies that have some jurisdiction or work in this area. So is there anybody other than BAI or BIA that you're currently housing that you work with in this area?
Mr. Waldock.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Hicks, we do have a Wyoming Air National Guard intel analyst in that facility with us as well. We, as far as the FBI is who we work with the majority of the time here due to jurisdictional issues on the reservation. They have their own building in Lander that they locate, I believe, the U.S. Attorney's office in there. I'm not 100% sure if the U.S. Attorney's office is in there or not, but it is a building there in Riverton. But they do not share space with us. And I think that's a federally owned building that they're in. I think it was built specifically for their needs.
And Madam Chairman, just as this moves forward, it might be worth having that discussion, at least see if there was any interest and facilities that would facilitate their needs. If we're co-locating with you guys, BIA and other federal law enforcement, seems like there might be some opportunities there for better communication, collaboration. I don't know, it's not that far to Lander, but I think it'd be a discussion at least worth having at some point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Waldock, you're correct. The FBI is in with the Attorney General's office. They're in the business park there in Lander. But a couple of questions, Madam Chairman, if I may. As you mentioned, this storage area specific needs here in Riverton, and you may not know that now, but do you have an idea of what that footprint is? You said a large storage area. Do you have a feel for that? And if not, maybe be thinking about that so we can know, is that 10 by 20? Is that 100 by 40? What is that?
Madam Chairwoman.
Mr. Waldock.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson. The area that we have currently is, I would say, probably more of a 10 by 20 space. But that does not include our garage, which we could use for overflow space for that as well.
So Madam Chairman, just follow up. So we might just ask you to kind of be refining that to give it an appropriate space for that type of use. The next question, Madam Chairman, is you talk about a secured area would have like a vault or something of that nature, a walk-in vault or any, just an area that you can protect evidence, right?
Mr. Waldock.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson. Yes, for obvious reasons for, chain of custody, that type of thing, we have to have a secured evidence. And it's not necessarily a vault. Most of our offices, I'm not a construction guy, but oftentimes between the sheetrock, they put in chicken wire, for the lack of a better term, on all sides, all the way around, to where it's very difficult to get in there without setting an alarm off or something to that effect.
Thank you. And Madam Chairman, one more follow-up, if I may. Matt, I just need you to help me. I couldn't track with your numbers real well, and I apologize for that. But you've got three FTEs there currently in Riverton. Then you talked about some task force officers, and you used the number that you had 2 task force officers. And then you brought up that you had a representative from Riverton PD, the sheriff's office, a vacancy at the highway patrol and BIA. And in my mind, was that part of the 2, or was that, do you have 2 task force officers and then these other spaces? I didn't track that very well. I apologize.
Mr. Waldock.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, we have 3 full-time state employees in that office. We also have 2 task force officers, one from the Riverton Police Department, one from the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. We have a part-time BIA investigator in there. That's been somewhat a revolving door due to staffing issues with them as well. And then we have an unfilled Wyoming Highway Patrol Task Force. In addition to that, and what I didn't say, and I touched on it, we also have a full-time Wyoming Air National Guard intel analyst that sits in that building full-time as well.
So Madam Chairman, so then the total space requirements would be 8.
Mr. Waldock.
Madam Chairwoman, yes, sir.
And I have to be careful. I use Lander math, and that's sometimes a little deficient. So 8, okay.
And I would like to do a follow-up question with what Representative Larson asked before. When he said he asked you to follow up to find out appropriate space, but so I'm trying to see if your question was, and if it were a different space, if it weren't the space you were in, because you said that you have 2,700 square feet for a garage currently. If you were in a different space, is that what you feel like your needs would be? Do you think that's do you need that much space? So for both the garage as well as like how much space for a secure evidence facility and how much for secured parking? I don't know if you can, just spitball that or not. I know what you currently have. Is that what you would need?
Madam Chairwoman, yes, ma'am. What we're currently in adequately serves our purposes. As far as how big a space we need, it really kind of depends. And I'll use an example of an officer involved shooting. Oftentimes we have to bring, if the vehicles were shot, oftentimes we will bring those to our garage, and then we have to do a bullet trajectory and that type of thing. So you would put the vehicle in the secured garage bay, and then you put, for lack of a better term, wooden dowels. They're not, but they are. And then we have to photograph those, and then we have to 3D image those. And it just does take some space. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but the space is needed when we do need it, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any further comments, Mr. Waldock? All right, thank you. Let's see. We're going to stick with task force members, it looks like. Mr. Maury, would you like to take the hot seat? Thank you, sir. If you would introduce yourself to everyone and then proceed with testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, I'm Jack Morey, Deputy State Engineer, State Engineer's Office. I do have my superintendent in Water Division 3. He's stepped out of the room. Hopefully he'll return soon, but he's going to help me give this presentation.
Yeah, that's a good, would you prefer to, for us to move to the next person and so that is it Mr. Frederickson is here?
Madam Chairman, that would be great. He's a major portion of my presentation.
Sure. Well, okay.
What do you like?
Who's running this show? Thank you, Mr. Maury. We'll go ahead and we'll pause, wait for him to come back. And also, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10 o'clock. All right, we are back after our morning break here and we will jump right in with the state engineer's office. So if you both want to introduce yourself and then proceed to testify.
Thank you. My name is Jack Murray, Deputy State Engineer, State Engineer's Office.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the task force. My name is Josh Frederickson. I'm the Division 3 Superintendent for the State Engineer's Office.
Well, thank you both for being here and go ahead at well, either one.
Again, State Engineers, Water Division 3 office is located in Riverton. Water Division 3 is any tributary to the Yellowstone River west of the Bighorn Mountains. There are currently 4 staff members in the Riverton office. They've been at their current location for over 40 years. This location is adequate and meets all the needs of the water appropriators that they serve. One key part of this location is a shop to make repairs to their equipment and to store ATVs, snow machines, stream gauges, and all the highly technical telemetry work that goes along with those stream gauges. Water Division 3 also has offices in Worland with 4 staff and Powell. There's 3 staff in Powell. During the water season, the staff is in the field sometimes over 10 hours a day. We've carefully considered if Worland and Powell staff members were to move to Riverton, we feel that would not be feasible due to extensive employee fatigue, safety, overtime, mileage, hotel room expense, etc. The current SEO office lease information, it's located at 715 East Roosevelt. Foster Investments is the lessor. It's currently a 4-year term. It renews this, or we have to renew it this month. There's 3,840 square feet of office space plus shop space. It costs us $38,421 and some cents. That's annual cost. That breaks down to less than $10 a square foot. It does have a lease payment schedule that I also included on the handout. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I'd hand over any other presentation to Mr. Frederickson.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Before we go to Mr. Frederickson, any questions or comments at this point? Representative Larson.
So, yeah, if I could, Mr. Murray, I think the conversation that we've seen in the legislature is not so much of moving district offices to be centrally located because they're providing boots on ground for our producers and stuff like that. But perhaps what components, is there a component of the office services in the state agency in Cheyenne that might better serve the public as a whole if it was relocated to a central area? So, and I know that this brings up a lot of different conversations on relocating of people, and that, but I'd like to just set that part aside if I could. But is there a component of the work done by your agency in Cheyenne that would better serve the public if it were more centrally located?
Mr. Moore.
Madam Chairwoman, a main portion of headquarters in Cheyenne is our interstate streams. We have weekly trips that we have to take to as a matter of fact, later this week, we got 2 or 3 people going to Santa Fe on the Colorado River. with Cheyenne's location to Denver, we have direct flights to, that's the one example, Santa Fe. We're going to Salt Lake. We actually have found we can be more efficient with our budget if we hop on a drive to 45 minutes to an hour to Denver, hop on a plane, go to Salt Lake, attend the meeting, come back. That's very inexpensive and it does not take up much time. Those are two examples of our interstate streams division that definitely would cause complications if they were to relocate.
Follow up, Representative Larson?
Fair enough, Madam Chairman. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Fair enough. But more importantly, are there any services that are done in Cheyenne that would benefit the state if they were relocated? I realize and really appreciate, because that really, what you just pointed out is important. But on the flip side of that, are there services that might be better placed elsewhere? I guess is really the question, and you're the expert, so.
Mr. Maury.
Madam Chairwoman, our agency is already split up into the four divisions. So our water users have the boots on the ground people spread out throughout the state. Our permittings and all that, being close to other state agencies and whatnot, they function quite efficiently in Cheyenne. Our customers that need boots on the ground was your comment. I feel we have that taken care of.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
President Driscoll.
Chairman, Madam Chairman, how many trips a year do you take out of state approximately? You're talking Salt Lake and the Colorado River.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Driscoll, I don't have that data with me right now.
Ballpark.
With the Colorado River, I'm going to say there's 2 or 3 trips a month that are taken out of state right now with all the activity on the Colorado.
Madam Chairman, follow.
President Driscoll.
Open positions in Cheyenne, are you fully staffed in Cheyenne at this point?
Mr. Maury.
Madam Chairwoman, we have 3 open positions in Cheyenne right now. The 2 of those, there's a total of 9 applicants for those 3 positions. We have had standing field positions that we can't even get applicants for. Case in point, Mr. Frederickson's been at his position a little over a year now. And I'd like for him to maybe answer how that went down. He has a lot better
Thank you.
background to that.
Do you want to, Mr. Frederickson, do you want to address that or just start your presentation if that's all right? However you'd like to proceed.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer that question. I don't have a whole lot of presentation to add to Mr. Maury's. President Driscoll, to answer that question, I was the prior District 3 Water Commissioner, which includes the Wind River from Du Bois to Riverton and all those drainages, and then the Bighorn River up to Graybull. That was my district area. And when I moved into the superintendent position, we had some difficulty finding qualified applicants for my old position. I believe we had a total of 3 or 4 applicants, almost total. Luckily, most of them were qualified. However, we were only able to interview 2 people, offered it to the first person. They had taken a different job. And luckily, after that, another application came in. We interviewed that person and they did accept after, we deemed that they were a good candidate. I do know that and it's not Riverton, but other field offices, other superintendents have had issues finding qualified applicants for their water commissioner positions.
Do you have any follow-up, President Driscoll? Representative Larson.
Thanks. Josh, do you think, so as you look back in that process, was it the pay scale or was it location or combination of both? Give me your thoughts on that, please.
Mr. Frederickson.
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, I believe it was probably a combination of both.
Follow up, Representative Larson. And it looks like Co-Chairman Hicks has a question or a comment.
Yeah, no, Madam Chairman, so this would probably be to Jack, but given the different divisions with groundwater, surface water, safety of dams, we've got the ground water well drillers. I mean, I think there's one person. Is there any function, given the technology that we have today, that those employees would have to be in Cheyenne in order to perform their jobs? Or like many of the agencies we've seen, he'll have people scattered around their state. They're still doing the same job. They're just not in the same building. Is there any essential function in any of those divisions that would absolutely require physical presence in Cheyenne to perform their duties?
Mr. Maury?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Hicks. The simple answer to your question would be no, there is no function that requires them to be in Cheyenne. They could probably complete their job in other locations.
All right, thank you.
I will,
No, go ahead if you have something.
if I may expand a little bit. Our water well driller is in Powell, that division. The water well driller division, the guy lives in Powell. Okay. One concern that the agency would have is qualified applicants. Again, my example of, we have 3 open positions. We have 9 applications right now that we're reviewing. And we've actually we have open hydrographer positions in the field that we've just closed them because we can't even get applications. Another concern that we would have is and I'd be just reiterating my interstate travel stuff. So that's my.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. President Driscoll.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Maury, do you have hydrographer positions open in Cheyenne? Is it the position that's a problem or is it towns? Because, obviously Cheyenne is your pay scale higher on the positions in Cheyenne because, or are they the same? We're just not getting positions in the country.
Mr. Moore.
Madam Chairwoman, our Water Division 4, which is over the Cokeville country, that's where there's open hydrographers. I do believe you're fully staffed this summer. And Division 2, northeast corner of the state is staffed, and then Cheyenne has a couple open, Torrington, which is Water Division 1, North Platte, Little Snake. They have some open positions as well. Again, pay would be part of it. And obviously the location by default is why we're not getting the applications. I do have another example. We tried to diversify and spread our agency out more. We wanted to put a Green River water modeler in the town of Green River. We got no applicants. We moved that to Cheyenne and we had several applicants, and they have now filled that position.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for the state engineers? All right, thank you, gentlemen. If you want to come join us, Mr. Maury, and it looks like I have the Department of Education next on my list, if you all are ready to go. Good morning. If you would introduce yourself to the task force and for the people at home, and then go ahead and proceed with your testimony.
You bet. I'm Leslie Bechtel Van Orman, and I'm the program manager for the Vision Outreach Services at the Department of Education. The department is moving to having more staff all across the state, really making an effort to hire the most qualified people they can find in order to support our educational agencies as best, with the top quality people we have. So I've been in outreach for years, and it was sort of just us who were outreaching. And now we have people across the department who are scattered across the state, and some in other states also. So in terms of we have 3 outreach offices in the Department of Education, Powell, Casper, and Riverton, Lander. We were in Riverton for years and years. And then when they, in the building on that, the old high school building at Tompkins Stadium. And when we got, when it was time for them to start looking at the demolition of that building, we had to find other place to go, and ended up being able to find a place in Lander. We have about 1,375 square feet. 500 square feet of that is storage. And our square footage is, or we pay about a little over $10 per square foot. There are 6 employees of the department in Fremont County at this time. 1 telework. We all have the opportunity to telework. So some of those folks telework. There are 3 of us who are based, who like actually work in the Lander office. The Vision Outreach Services we come with a lot of stuff. So we're the ones that have the need for physical storage space, and also space to, I guess I would step back and say we support people of all ages who have vision impairment. So we spend a lot of time in the schools, but we also spend a lot of time in the homes of individuals of all ages in the state of Wyoming who are blind or have low vision. But we do need space to be able to confidentially meet with individuals if they prefer not to have us in their home, or if there are safety concerns for our staff. I guess that is generally our needs in terms of space.
And I've got a question for you. So how long have you been in Lander?
Madam Chairperson, we have been there for just 9 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned storage, and I think you've said before, do you have any needs for a temperature controlled?
Yes.
Storage?
Yeah, we have a lot of electronic magnification equipment that involves computers, LCD screens, large touch screen monitors. Braille materials are sometimes brailled on thermoform material, and so if they get too hot, they warp. So our book materials, we need the climate controlled piece for that. Magnification, even magnifiers and other battery operated equipment. So yeah, we need climate controlled storage.
Okay, Representative Larson.
Thank you. When you were in Riverton quite a while. And so when you made the move to Riverton, can you just walk me through the employees? So how many of those, so did any employees relocate? Do you have employees now that drive from Riverton to Lander? And previously, were there employees that drove from Lander to Riverton? It's a busy highway in the morning, but just help us understand how that looks right now.
Ms. Van Orman.
Madam Chairperson and Representative Larson, yes, we have all that stuff going on. So we have 3 staff who are based out, who live in Riverton, and 3 in Lander. 2 of the staff in Riverton have always been telework, have always utilized, or have recently for the last couple of years utilized telework. So they work out of their homes primarily. We have 1 staff member now that commutes to Lander part of the time and teleworks part of the time. And then there are 2 of us that live in Lander and now no longer commute.
Follow up, Representative Larson.
So I have to confess, I didn't know that you were in Lander till yesterday afternoon. Because I'd always gone over to come up here to Tonkin and just space it out. So why relocate to Lander? Was it space availability? Walk me through the decision to do that.
Ms. Van Orman?
Madam Chairperson, Representative Larson. We originally looked for office space here out of a will not to have to move equipment as as little as distance as possible. But we were unable to find a space that was of adequate size. We found a lot of spaces that were too small or too large. So we ended up spreading out our search and finding a location in Lander that would work out of just desperation. We looked for, I don't know, probably 2 months and actually ended up getting an agreement with the school to leave our equipment in the building when we were continuing to search for a place to move.
Well, I just, this almost appears as temporary. But is your equipment still in Fremont 25 and you're completely relocated?
We are completely relocated.
And could you remind me again the square footage that is the current square footage adequate, or did you just fit into what was available? Can you walk me through that, please?
Ms. Van Orman?
Chairman.
Yes. Madam Chairman and Representative Larson, yeah, the space we have is adequate now for our staff and for our equipment.
Thank you. Follow up.
And where are you at, Lander? Next door to where I live, or?
In Fremont County terms, we're between the old bottle shop and the Lincoln Street Bakery.
Okay, got it.
And I believe, Director, did you have after you're done with your side conversation? Did you have a question, Director?
I do. Hi, Leslie. Thank you. So 2 things. I was trying to hear if you're saying with this recent move to Lander, we're good. We don't necessarily need to be part of the Riverton office conversation. Yes or no?
Ms. Van Orman?
Madam Chairperson and
Director
Director Vincent. Yeah, we currently are good with our space. The Vision Outreach Services, our locations are really dependent on where we can find we want to maintain our geographical support areas, but we're really sort of stuck with where we can find people who can do the work. So there are only 30 teachers of students with visual impairments and orientation and mobility specialists in the state of Wyoming. So the location, the current location is working for us. We have closed and relocated our regional offices depending on staffing, just because we're dependent on finding a teacher of the deaf or finding a teacher for the blind or a certified vision rehabilitation therapist. And so we sort of have to go to them sometimes instead of getting them to relocate to the current location of an office.
Follow up, Director?
Thank you. And the reason I was trying to understand that is if WDE was to be part of a Riverton office building, it was the storage conversation from before. I was just curious, when you're storing, but maybe I've fallen behind the times on this from my school days. Not to put you on the spot, but what part is electronic equipment? What part is Braille book and what part is traditional book? I mean, when you're looking for storage. Yeah.
Ms. Van Orman, and so what are the full needs for a climate controlled area?
Madam Chairperson and Director Vincent, electronic equipment is a majority of the equipment that we have. We oversee the Montgomery Trust Fund for the state of Wyoming, and that allocates specialized equipment and provides training to people, as a funding source of last resort for individuals who are blind. And that equipment is the mass of what we have. The non-climate controlled materials, probably 20% of what we store.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Chairman Hicks.
Lisa, just a couple of things. And so you just recently made this move as I understand it. That's correct?
Yeah.
And prior to that, the office was here in Riverton, and the reason from the move was just the demands of what you needed for space and conditions and environment. So are the 6 FTEs, was it 6 FTEs that were working in the office here? Or is that just in all of Fremont County? So let me just get to the question. Did the folks that were working in the office here live in Riverton and are now commuting, or did they sell their houses, or did they live in Lander and now they no longer have to commute? And I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. Just being familiar with other places in the state, 20-mile commute, that's what we say, just going to the grocery stores in my area of the state. Did they also move from Riverton, or did they already reside in Lander, or are they just staying put commuting now?
Ms. Van Orman.
Madam Chairman and Senator Hicks, we have one person who, three staff resided in Riverton, but 2 were teleworking, so they continue to telework. One person now commutes a couple days of a week to Lander, but the other staff members lived in Lander and no longer commute.
So, Madam Chairman, so I think that was the nature what I was trying to get to. It's regardless of where the office is, people are staying here. They can choose to live in Lander or Riverton, whatever facilitates, and it's working in that scenario right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think my question is similar. You said you need to maintain the geographical service area, but that could be accomplished either from a Lander or a Riverton office as far as the actual work. It really is a wash, if you will, if it were in either town.
Yes, Madam Chairperson, either way it would be fine. We cover Fremont, Teton, Lincoln, Sublette, Sweetwater, Uinta counties.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that maybe having the stability of knowing that you don't have to go find a new lease would be something that is good for you?
Yes, Madam Chairperson, just not moving our equipment is great.
Thank you, Ms. Van Orman. Further questions or any other comments? All right, thank you, Ms. Van Orman. Next on my list, Department of Health. Oh,
Madam Chair, I believe we'll have one person here, and Stephanie Pyle will be joining via remote Zoom.
great. Can we bring in Ms. Pyle?
So Madam Chairman, I believe Senior Administrator Pyle, who is over public health, could probably give us an idea of the lease space that they use here in Riverton. And of course, we have Superintendent Orbis, who is the superintendent for the Life Resource Center, and can give us a perspectives of that footprint.
Thank you. And so I don't see well. Do we have Ms. Pyle? Okay, so if you both would introduce yourself to the task force and to everyone, and then go ahead and proceed with testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is Stephanie Pyle. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you. You're not extremely loud, so if you'll just make sure you speak up. Thank you.
Okay, I certainly will. Members of the task force, my name is Stephanie Pyle. I'm the Senior Administrator of the Public Health Division with the Wyoming Department of Health. So happy to be with you today for a few moments to talk a little bit about the Riverton space that we have. And I can also mention the Lander space that we have as well. As the task force is likely aware, the Wyoming Department of Health has staff members around the state in our direct care facilities, our public health nursing offices, and our WIC offices, as well as some employees who telework around Wyoming. So in Riverton, we do have our WIC office. That program, as you may know, is the Women, Infants, and Children program that provides quality nutrition, education, and services to eligible families, also breastfeeding promotion and support, a monthly food prescription or package, and referrals to maternal, prenatal, and pediatric healthcare services. Our Riverton office is approximately 840 square feet. We have 3 employees in that office, and our space needs include essentially 3 private rooms. One is a clinic style room. So if you picture a healthcare provider's office, it's similar to that. And then 2 additional private office spaces for breastfeeding support, also intake processes that often involve sensitive information. And then typically a waiting room is what you would see in our normal WIC offices. So again, that's about 840 square feet total. We have a need for secure and non-secure storage space, and of course, accessible space throughout. And the space requirements in Lander that we currently have are very similar to that, the 3 rooms, 3 staff. And in Riverton, we're located at 877 North 8th Street. In Lander, we do have space in the courthouse that's provided at no cost by the county. In Riverton, we do pay $12,000 per year with federal funds for that space. And I think that just about covers everything I plan to talk to the task force about, but I am certainly happy to stand for any questions before turning things over to my colleague, Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Ms. Pyle. Representative Larson.
So, morning, Stephanie. Couple of questions. One is 877 North 8th is again reference to the U.S. Energy building that DFS is in, and others, if you just verify that. And then could you just give us a little history? How long have you guys been in that location? How well is it serving the clients in Fremont County? Thirdly, is it a positive thing to have WIC close to DFS and the availability to have that close proximity there? So if you could just give us a little conversation on that, I'd appreciate it.
Ms. Pyle.
Certainly, Madam Chair, Representative Larson, thank you for that question. In terms of how long we've been in that space, and you're right, it is co-located. I actually don't know how long we've been there. It's been quite some time. I could certainly verify when we actually started operating out of that space. And then to your third question, you are definitely correct that it is very beneficial to our participants to be in a space where we are co-located. In several communities, we're actually located with our own public health nursing staff, and that is certainly helpful. But then outside of our state agency, to be co-located with other state agencies, such as the Department of Family Services, Department of Workforce Services, we have found that is very helpful to our participants, where they can go to one location for multiple services. And that's very helpful for those who may have, a lack of resources or issues with transportation. It is very helpful to them to be able to be going to one place for multiple appointments. So thank you very much for that question.
Any follow-up, Representative Larson? Any questions? Any further questions for Ms. Pyle? Thank you. If you'll stick around while we continue on with the Department of Health. And is it Superintendent?
Yeah, it's Administrator, the Wyoming Life Resource Center. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the task force. My name is Jeremy Forbes. I am the facilities administrator of the Wyoming Life Resource Center, and I've been in that role for a little over 6 years now. So the Wyoming Life Resource Center, as you probably well know, we just finished a large $86 million construction project that added 14 new buildings to our facility, as well as one full remodel for approximately about 186,000 square feet of new space. With our construction and prior demolition program, we also have 16 residential buildings that are still on campus, as well as about 4 other buildings that we're not utilizing. So what we're doing right now is partnering with folks like DFS, DEQ to provide available space for other state agencies that may be interested. I found the conversation with Director Vincent earlier really interesting about how we, rank the buildings in terms of their viability for future occupation or current occupation. So many of our buildings, which led to the necessitation of our construction project, were probably in that 2, 3, or 4 rankings. So just kind of an interesting way as we move forward and think about how to utilize this space. Another thing that we are doing right now is looking at the potential for a adolescent crisis center up there. This is early in the stage of conversation, but we have identified some of the space for that, whether it was a DFS project, Department of Health project, joint project, or whatever it may be. So happy to talk about our new space, our current mission, any of the existing buildings for possible utilization for the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Questions? Comments? Anything from either Ms. Pyle or Mr. Forbes?
We're working on it. We hope to get the new fence. Excuse me, Madam Chairman, Representative Nicholas. We hope to have that new fence in place next spring, summertime.
That made Representative Larson think of a question.
If I could go back to Ms. Pyle for just a sec, I failed to ask her, the space that you're in this lease space, is it adequate? Does it exceed what you need, or does it not meet your expectations? Can you?
Ms. Pyle?
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, the building, the space needs are adequate. And I think as others have shared, the building is, we appreciate the space, but I think the building is probably in need of some repair and some routine maintenance type things. But the space itself is an adequate size for our needs.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for being here, and we'll just keep moving right along. Thank you. And it looks like Administrator Wolf, if you want to rejoin us. I know you did, but if you'll briefly just, for the record, tell us who you are and then proceed with testimony.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am Jason Wolf. I'm the Administrator of Workforce Standards with the Department of Workforce Services. And kind of one of my other duties as assigned is overseeing our 18 facilities throughout the state. I do have online, I think the agenda said Christina West. We do have Miss Holly Simone, who is the administrator over workforce programs online, just in case you may have questions that I can't answer. But I guess just moving on, Madam Chairman, I did provide a handout with kind of our current operations in Riverton and Lander. Currently, our Riverton operations, as we discussed, we do own the one location on 422 East Fremont, roughly about 5,600 square feet. We currently have 15 employees at that location. I would note in that location, since we were talking about people who aren't at the table, we do we sublease a, won't call it an office, but a cubicle there to the Job Corps, one person with the Job Corps of Wyoming, if that's of interest to you. And then we do, like we talked about, lease that location at 609 East Madison here in Riverton, where we have 2 vocational rehab counselors. And again, just space adequacy as far as mobility and ADA requirements just aren't met at that Fremont location. So as far as our lander operations, we do have a good sized building over there. Again, about 5,400 square feet in lander that houses 15 employees. And then the annual cost of that lease is $153,000. And then I would just kind of note, we do have a mix of program operations in all those locations. Primarily, the Riverton and Lander locations are what we call our workforce centers, where primarily public facing is a lot of our operations in DWS, and as a result of that, we do require a heavy physical presence in the office, though we do allow for some rotating schedules of telework. I'll pause there, Madam Chairman, if there's any questions on the current spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I wanted to know a little bit more about, you said with the extra space that's being leased. So am I understanding it right that I guess I want to know just two things. So what's leased is, it looks like about 1,100 square feet. Is that just because that's the size of the building, or is that additional space needed? And is it basically just because it's not ADA compliant, and so that we could, obviously gain the efficiency of not having two spaces?
Madam Chairman, yes, I believe, and Ms. Simone can maybe speak to this as she oversees the vocational rehab program, but my understanding is the current space of 1,082 square feet is ample. It does contain offices and a conference location, which I think is adequate for the current staff.
Okay, but and then also in addition, but without the if we had a building that was ADA compliant, that fills the needs of that space.
Madam Chairman, correct.
Okay, and I know obviously there needs to be workforce centers probably in both Lander and Riverton. Are there any efficiencies that could be gained as far as maybe an increase in personnel in Riverton and less in Lander, or is the breakup between the two towns how it is currently? Is what needed in order to meet the needs of each community?
Madam Chairman, I might toss that one over to Administrator Simone, as she does oversee those operations and might have a better idea of the needs in each community than I currently do.
Okay, Ms. Simone, if you would introduce yourself and then go ahead and you can answer that question or weigh into any other information you'd like to give the task force.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jason. I'm Holly Simone. I'm the Workforce Program Administrator. So I oversee unemployment insurance, our workforce centers, vocational rehabilitation, and our business training and support unit. To answer your question, I'm not sure that we would be able to consolidate staff. And the reason for that is that our caseloads are fairly high in both Lander and Riverton. On the vocational rehabilitation side, the Riverton caseload is around 117, and in Lander it's 129. And then in our workforce centers, we have about anywhere from around 1,000 walk-in people that come in and do some self-service, but we also do case management. And then we have around 2,300 folks that we are providing services to on caseloads for WIOA participants or Wagner-Pizer. That also includes our veterans and dislocated workers. So our caseloads are pretty high in both areas. If we did consolidate a building and were with other agencies like DFS or Department of Health, I think that could provide some great efficiencies and a lot of support to the participants and clients that we serve. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ms. Simone. Is there a further question, Director Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jason, I'm recalling when we had our facility planning meeting, with you and your team. I believe Workforce Services and DFS are probably the two largest agencies that you need to be with public transportation, right? You have to, in order to get your clients and to be able to come in, probably more so than the other ones. And I've heard at the SBC meetings before, well, why is a square foot larger here than that in dollar per square foot? And Andrew with A&I would know, but sometimes after you have what you need for your team, it just whatever else was available because it was on a public transportation line, right? So I think you're the two agencies that's kind of paramount to what you do. Is that true?
Madam Chairman, Director Vincent, that's absolutely correct. And a lot of our locations we lease are primarily picked because of public transportation availability around that vicinity.
Any follow-up, Director? Further questions? Comments for Workforce Services? All right, thank you both. We will move right along then. And so what do I have? Veterans Commission, is that associated with you guys, or is there Mr. Richards?
Mr. Chairman, Douglas Shope with the military department, and he is also remotely participating. Mr. Shope, if you could turn your camera on.
There you are. So Mr. Shope, there we go. If you could introduce yourself and to the task force, and then go ahead and proceed with testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the task force. I'm Doug Shope, Deputy Director of the Wyoming Military Department, attending on behalf of the Veterans Commission and Executive Director Tim Shepard. My staff provides the budgeting, fiscal, and contracting support for the commission. The Veterans Commission has 8 state veteran service officers and 1 supervisor around the state. The military department has 1 office leased in Riverton for the Veterans Commission for 1 service officer. We originally leased this space in 2015. This state veteran service officer also operates remotely by setting up a table and displays and computer in public buildings in the region a few times a year. I must qualify that I have never personally seen this facility. The lease space is 100% general funds. The space is 230 square feet for $4,500 annual rent at $19.57 per square foot. The location is 324 East Washington Avenue. It also has parking available, and currently this facility is adequate. The need in Riverton location for 1 veteran service officer is based upon the distribution of veterans in the state. And in 2015, that's when we realized we really needed a permanent office space there in Riverton. Qualifications, if we were to build a new facility for this requirement, we would need 1 office of at least 200 square feet for a veteran and companion to set opposite of the state veteran service officer and observe a computer monitor to assist the service officer in completing forms. And the space requires access by a wheelchair. A shared waiting area that includes space for 2 veterans with companions in that facility. 2 handicap parking spaces in addition to the architectural calculation for the handicap spaces in the shared parking lot, since the majority of our veterans seeking assistance are handicapped, and then 1 regular space for the veteran service officer in the shared parking lot. Access to shared men's and women's restrooms that are handicap accessible. And it would also be nice to have access to a shared break room since we don't have that now. And I do have 1 note from previous testimony. You know, the Wyoming Air National Guard member previously briefed in the Attorney General space has not been a consideration for the military department. That partnership exists from the federal side of our agency historically. And Madam Chairman, that's all I have. Pending questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shope. Senator Salazar?
Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir. Just had a quick question. As we see more active component and reserve and National Guard retire, I'm just wondering if your department may actually need to expand its personnel to some extent that might require additional room or space for your services, particularly in the Fremont County area. And again, thank you for what you do for the state. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, I apologize. Yes, that is possible, but right now, we track the state's veterans numbers from the federal government that are provided to us. And at this point, with the distribution that we have of service officers in the state, we're thinking that it is adequate currently. That could obviously change. So we would be flexible to look at that. But right now, I think we have adequate numbers around the state and specifically with one located in Riverton to cover that area.
Follow up? No. Representative Larson, did you have a question?
I did, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Doug. You kind of outlined some space requirements, and I just want to clarify if those are requirements like federal requirements in order to have a Veterans Administrative Services, or if those are just references that you feel would be appropriate. Because I don't see some of that. This is your facility here in Riverton, I think, is in the same building as Senator Barrasso's office, and so if you can I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly on what the needs are.
Mr. Shope?
Madam Chairman, these needs are not outlined anywhere. They're just practical needs that we see and have evaluated. And so it's pretty simplistic. When it comes, the biggest thing is a large office to be able to get wheelchairs in and out of.
Thanks, Doug.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Shope? All right, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely. So next on my list is Department of Revenue. Mr. Richards?
Madam Chairman, Administrator Brett Fanning is also joined with us.
Can you see and hear us, Mr. Fanning?
Madam Chair, yes, I certainly can. So
great. If you would introduce yourself and then go ahead and proceed with testimony.
Absolutely. So Madam Chair, members of the task force, my name is Brett Fanning. I'm the Excise Tax Administrator at the Wyoming Department of Revenue. And just kind of a little bit of background about my particular division. So there's 34 staff in the Excise Tax Division. That's including myself. 25 of those folks are actually in Cheyenne in the Capitol Complex. So that means I have 9 folks that are outstationed throughout the state. Obviously, including 1 person at an office and lease space in Riverton. So that lease space in Riverton, it is kind of a smaller complex. I've been there at least once to visit my field representative in that office. It's not very big. So it has 275 square feet. Just doing a little quick math, that's kind of 17 by 17. So it's not a big office space. But in general, our field representatives, what they're going to do, they are a point of contact for our vendors located throughout the state. So in our Riverton office, my field representative there, she particularly deals with vendors located in Fremont County. And then she also works with vendors who are located in Hot Springs County. So she's going to visit vendors all throughout those counties. And then they also have the opportunity to come see her at her office. So as far as the functional needs for what our field representatives, it's really just a basic kind of waiting room for if there are multiple vendors waiting to see our field reps. And then really it's just an office location where you can have a couple different people meet with her. When vendors come and visit our field representatives at these offices, it's primarily to talk about their license, their account. And so there is going to be a little bit of confidential information. It's taxpayer information in there. So just some sort of basic security requirement is something that these locations have. Now, a lot of it's electronic nowadays, but there is some sort of storage requirement, just basic, minimal. It's important to note too, so our location there in Riverton, 505 Hurst Street, just kind of in that central southwest part of the city, it really isn't the most ideal location. It's important to note too that a lot of the lease space, at least for the Department of Revenue, it's not in my budget. It's through A&I. And a lot of those negotiations that happen with lease space, at least with the Department of Revenue, go through A&I. And yes, our field reps, they do have a say in it. And we do at the department kind of have the final approval saying if it's going to work for our constituents. But A&I really has the final say in kind of that lease space. So Madam Chair, that's kind of all the testimony I have for today, and I will sit for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Questions, comments for Department of Revenue or Mr. Fanning? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we've consolidated you guys over to the Thyra Thompson building, I believe. And has that consolidation worked good or bad for your folks there? And would you anticipate if we were able to consolidate, you'd see similar results here?
Mr. Fanning?
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, yes. So one of my field representatives, the one in Casper, is at that new facility in Casper. And it has been effective. It really has, because if you really think about this, when a vendor is going to come in and discuss their sales tax license, there is a synergy there that can be created if they have other governmental services that they are seeking. And so, yes, in that Casper facility, we have seen a synergy. Now, going back to our Riverton office, as an administrator, as a supervisor, I do have a slight concern because a lot of my field rep offices, they're one-person offices. And maybe they're not always located in a state facility where there is, for lack of a better, just an added layer of protection. You know, they're not necessarily alone. Sometimes when vendors come and visit our field representatives, sometimes these can be contentious discussions, right? Maybe there's taxes owed. Maybe there is a revocation in process. So just, yes, there is a synergy created when offices can be in one location. Now, out of my 9 offices that are located outside of Cheyenne, we have the one in Casper and then the one in Sheridan that are in state buildings. And I'll believe I'll fact check myself on that, but I checked before my testimony. So those buildings do create some basic synergy when everything is in one spot.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Any Senator Salazar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's an interesting point you raised with regard to the single employee here in Riverton. And I was actually thinking the same way, given the area that you deal with, it would be advantageous then perhaps to have your employee consolidated into a more focal point of some type of an office building where other agencies were housed as well, not only for security reasons, but just overall with regard to the comfort level of your employee then?
Mr. Fanning?
Madam Chair, Senator Salazar, absolutely. I actually did consult with my Riverton employee prior to this meeting. And yes, it is advantageous for her to have some level of security. Again, for the Department of Revenue, we do just need kind of an office space and then a basic meeting room where folks can be available to ask questions. Not necessarily nothing more, nothing less. And that is something that when I did talk to my Riverton employee, she did think it was a good idea to have kind of everyone in one spot in that area, as opposed to having to go here for one service and there for another one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other question or comment as far as the Department of Revenue, so we will move on to State Lands and Investments. Good morning. If you both will introduce yourself, say who you're with, and then go ahead and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Jason Crowder. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of State Lands and Investments, here presenting on behalf of Director Scoggin. With me, I have Interim State Forester Kelly Norris. What I would like to provide the committee today, or the task force today, is everything that the office does separate from the Wyoming State Forestry Division. Ms. Norris can provide that information specific to them. We have one office in Lander. It houses two individuals. That office is 490 square feet. It's located at 277 Main Street, prime location on Main Street. The annual rent for that office is $10,080 per year. That comes out to about $20.57 per square foot. On top of that, we pay $6,660 per year for internet and for telecom and the incidentals like that. We feel it's an efficient location for our staff. When you compare the travel, meals and expenses and hotel rooms, that certainly exceeds the $16,740 per year expense we currently experience. We moved those staff members from Cheyenne to that office back in the 80s. And as I understand it, this is the longest running lease in the area, if not the state, as far as leased space. We moved those individuals over there when the state was experiencing a lot of foreclosures in its farm loan program. Those individuals were focused on appraisals and securing those foreclosed properties. Since then, obviously, that demand has lessened, and we've refocused that staff to not only do the appraisal work, but also be closer to the work that our field staff does. So they have been transitioned from 2 appraisers to 1 appraiser and 1 field staff. And we feel like that's a very efficient move for us. It moves the staff from the Cheyenne offices to where they are needed in the state as far as the work that they're doing. We've made that determination over years of analysis, and when we need to look at budget cuts, is it appropriate to have them in Cheyenne? Is it appropriate to have them closer to the field? We do feel like Lander is centrally focused for their work. Their area of service is the whole western side of the state. We also have one more individual that works out of his house, an inspector for our oil and gas leases, and he works out of his house out of Matitsi. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Ms. Norris, unless anybody has any questions for me.
I have a question for you. So that was, all of that information was about that Lander office. Do you see any reason, is there any reason that it would need to be in Lander versus Riverton?
Madam Chair, a great question. We have looked at moving it to other places on the western side of the state and then trying to be efficient in doubling up on other state-owned buildings or other state leased areas. That effort hasn't been done lately, but we've looked at the Life Resource Center, as was mentioned before, but it's been about 8 or 10 years ago we've done that, and the Fire Academy, and trying to find space there. Really, what we found at that time was that there was not adequate space for the individuals and mostly for storage of their field equipment
in the files that they need to do their job. It certainly can be relooked at. We haven't done that to date, but again, their service area is the whole western side of the state. So we're really just looking for a centralized location when we try to meet that efficiency need.
Thank you, Mr. Crowder. Any questions for Mr. Crowder before we head on to Ms. Norris? Representative Larson?
Have you ever been to that office?
I have been in there a time or two. Ms. Norris.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the Riverton Task Force. My name is Kelly Norris and I'm the interim state forester. State Forestry has two positions and they're located at the Wyoming Fire Academy here in Riverton, the assistant district forester position and the rural fire trainer. We recently relocated the district forester position to Cody. That position will likely be sharing office space with the Park County Conservation District. The State Forestry Office has been at the Wyoming Fire Academy since 2007. We don't pay rent. We don't pay for the cleaning, the grounds work, any plowing services or internet. We do pay for printing of paper, so we share that cost with the fire marshal's office. The office that we are located in is large enough to fit 3 to 4 employees, and there's also plenty of storage room for our equipment. The Wyoming Fire Academy fits us because they host numerous wildland fire trainings. They host the Rural Fire Advisory Council meetings and numerous other events that our staff attend. And we're very thankful for their partnership and allowing us to be in that building with us. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Ms. Norris. How many did you say? So how many total are in the building and what do you know the square footage of that building?
I do not, because it is not ours. It's the fire marshal's office. And I believe they have 7 to 9 employees, but our state forestry only has 2 employees in that building.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Norris? All right. If that's everything, thank you both for your testimony. Moving right along now, Mr. Richards.
Madam Chair, apologies. There was one late addition. Taylor Rossetti from the Wyoming Department of Transportation is here. They actually have their own lease that is not managed through the Department of Administration and Information. So they were included in our summary information, but they were not included in our list of agencies.
Okay, so Mr. Rossetti. Good morning. If you would introduce yourself and obviously tell us who you're with and then go ahead and proceed with testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator for WYDOT. Interim Director Westby sends his apologies for sending me. So as Mr. Richards mentioned, we do have some lease space here in Fremont County. And one of the reasons I'm here is it's actually for our driver services program. As many of the legislators may know, driver services was a program that was added to WYDOT in the early 90s. And a lot of our facilities predate that. So when those functions came over to us, we had to seek some outside space in order to accomplish that task. It's worked fine. I do think the location we're at in Riverton's the U.S. Energy Building. So I think to the conversation you guys are having here today, it absolutely supports the idea of trying to consolidate those public services in one spot. I think it serves the public well. That particular space, I believe your materials show it as 890 square feet. That was some old information. We expanded to 1,700 square feet in 2019. That does currently, I think, meet our needs. To give you an idea of what we do for driver services here in Fremont County, I have a crew of 3 that serves all of Fremont County. We operate 3 days a week in Riverton, 2 days a week over in Lander, and then we do go to Du Bois once a month as well. So that way I think we're a little bit closer to the people. I think it makes it a little bit easier for them. All in all, Fremont County is probably about our 7th busiest location when you look at it on average. So I think we're staffed right now, I think pretty well. In addition to the 3 dedicated examiners in Riverton, I also have a regional representative that has an office in the Riverton location. That particular individual also covers offices in Cody and Lovell, Thermopolis, Warland, as well as over to Casper. So it's kind of centrally located to us. Again, to your point, it puts that position closer to the people that they oversee and closer to the public that they provide the services to. So one other unique thing that we do require in the here in the Riverton location is we do need a paved pad in order to do motorcycle testing. That facility at the U.S. Energy complex actually does have that. That particular pad needs a minimum side of about 75 by 30. The only other thing, looking to the future, to Senator Hicks's point, trying to look out a little bit, the other additional thing in driver services that we would look to consider in the future is potentially trying to find a CDL examiner to service Fremont County. It currently is done through a lease with the fairgrounds on a appointment basis, but that examiner actually has to come from up north, comes down from Cody. So if you're looking at expansion, I would say space for probably 4+ here in Riverton would ideally suit us. Certainly, I think the department is agreeable to going into another state facility, especially in the context we're talking here, to have services in one location. That actually recently happened to us in Lander as well. We were in that space that the state recently bought for state parks. So we are now currently in that facility as well. So we moved from, it's just not YDOT managed, it's state managed position, our building. So that I'd certainly answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. Questions from the task force? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. And with that, that's, I believe, the conclusion of the agency testimony. So next we will hear from Director Vincent. We took a break at 10. Is everybody ready to just keep moving forward? Director Vincent. Yeah, exactly. My co-chairman just pointed out that it is 11:14. So we're doing very well. If you would introduce yourself, Director Vincent, and then go ahead and proceed with your testimony.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, members of the task force, Jerry Vincent, Director of the State Construction Department. And what we put together today will probably be more of a reference for those that have not been on a task force before. You're going to want to refer back to. I'm not going to step through every detail of it. But in page 2, so what I've laid out is what statute is for level 1 and level 2 and the activities that are normally taken into consideration during a level 1, some of the diligence that is done. And then on page 3, level 2, it's been mentioned by a couple different folks today that sometimes, depending on the project, depending on the bill language, depending on the funding, there's a level 1 and there's a 2, or there's a 3, or there's a level 1 like in Thyra, and then a 2, 3. So the diligence, I would tell you that from our standpoint, we work on level 1, level 2 activities overlapping. We do some of those concurrently. And not every one of these activities will be the situation based on the property or the site that's being looked at. For example, if there's an existing location, we will look at some of these things, but not all. I did go back and take a look, and it was mentioned that we have 2.5 million to due diligence, and there was the question of what if that's not enough? Could we go back through the SBC and get more 2.5 million? And so just using Thyra Thompson as an example, we went through level 1 and level 2 for $444,000 back in the day. And if I escalate that to today's dollars, that's about $575,000. And there were 5 sites that were in the running, and some folks would know who were here before me. I'm not sure how soon 2 or 3 of them dropped out in terms of what the diligence was that we did on them, and then stopped and then proceeded with the other ones. So typically what we will do is if this
task force finds an option not to be viable right now, we will hold back. We'll just stop on that diligence, time, money, so that we still have it to go deeper in some other situation. And I've actually done these in my past that we've thrown all this out and this one didn't work. And we were back taking a look at one of the ones that was tossed out early on and now it's back on the table again. So that's a possibility. But the diligence suggests going through 5 different sites and for $575,000 in today's money, it does suggest that the 2.5 million should be able to get us through a full level 1, level 2 study with wherever this task force wants to go. Going on to page 4, after just you'll want to probably refer back to 2 and 3. At some point, the task force is going to say, well, what's our next step? And we're going to look at what some of these level 1 activities are in level 2, but they're referenced for now. On page 4, we call it design, bid, build example that could relate to a new construction project. When we say design, bid, build, it could be the purchasing of an existing building. We are going to have to put some sort of design and build or tenant improvement into it. So just wanted to cover what the nomenclature is there and what it's referring to. It's not already tipping this to a brand new build, but that's just a type of delivery. And we are in that green box on the upper left right now that you are here. So we're just meeting, we're trying to learn, we're doing research, we're hearing from all the different agencies right now, we're doing some brainstorming. I would imagine we have a meeting at the end of this on kind of next steps and where we see ourselves going. And then we would start to drop down the way the flow chart works into the box below, and then the one below that, and we'd come back up to the top. And then we would have somebody on board from a design standpoint and start stepping through the schematic all the way through design development. And then in the third column, construction documents, where schematic design and construction documents are sequential. A lot of the coming down through level 1 and level 2 can be concurrent, especially with the money already there from a time standpoint. Any questions on that part so far from anyone? Okay. And then what I thought I would do is we went back and just so, well, what have we done in the past? And we went and looked at the last 10 years. If you go further back and just 10 years of office buildings, if you go further back, the information is less and less relevant. So I included on page 5, the initial workup for the Thyra Thompson building and the report. We go into page 6 where we talk about the overall project cost summary, and you kind of restate the reasons and why you're going here as sort of your mission statement, vision statement of what you're doing. And then as you can see, starting with page 7, there are a couple sites that were of interest. And then embedded within those sites, what if we did surface parking and what if we did a parking structure? So we even broke that out too from a cost and diligence standpoint. So you'll see on page 7, there was a diligence for a site 2 with a structure. And I highlighted 2015 because we updated, I think when I was talking to Senator Landon one day, he said, you know what, we started talking about this in the early 2000s. And then 2010 it started to take more shape. And so those numbers we take a look at, our department does as time goes by. I would hope there's not a lag like there was on Thyra, but it looks beautiful and we're finally there. But we did go back in 2015 and update the costs for each of the models at that point, and then it was approved and then we went forward. So you can see that's on page 7, site 2 was with a parking structure. On page 8, it was the desire of the task force to look at with surface parking, and with surface parking of 464 spots on page 8. And then on page 9, we looked at site number 5, which was 464 surface parking spots, not parking structure. And then that equated into, on page 10, site 3 was the selected site. We have the building square footage in there. It was surface parking. The parking stalls were revised to 422. We had our opinion of probable construction cost. And something else for the task force to consider. In the initial plan, the 4th floor was shelled space. You're hearing a lot of folks say, we know what we are today, but we don't know what we are in the future. So instead of spending that money, it was shelled out on the 4th floor. And glad that they have those thoughts back then, because then Chancery Court came into play. You'll see it change ordered into the dollar amount down below. And then the 4th story actually did become
part of the build, and we change ordered that in. 1.15 million for that. We upgraded the exterior of the facade. And then we also were able to go over into the maintenance building off to the side and renovate that. And then put a matching stone facing, which will help it last a lot longer on the outside of that building. As a construction project goes, I came in at the end of it the last year or so, but all along it appears that it's that dream project. Everything went right in terms of dollars, in terms of delivery. Added things occurred with the Chancery Court, the maintenance building, the stone, and I did have it confirmed. We are planning on reverting 3.5 million back to SAO, which has been earmarked for SBC, and it'll go into that fund. So when you look at those great projects that you're trying to hang on to, the Thyra Thompson one is certainly one of them. So next one we looked at in 2008 was the new state office building. Is known as the St. Mary's property. We had on page 11, we have level 3 design. Some of these, I mean, certainly some of you or LSO would know better than I. When I went back and looked, it just said cancel on some of the paperwork that I found. Some said vetoed. Some said put on hold indefinitely. So don't know what the exact term was and why. Some of you probably know better than I. But when we went back into our records, we saw that this was a vetoed. But to give you some sort of comparison, it's a 1.7 acres. It was 152,000 design. What we did is escalate the dollars so you could see, like Thyra today, the 44 million for Thyra would probably be closer to a 49 million today. When you're looking at today's cost, this one here, it was originally when asked in 2010. It was at 75 million. And then in 2009, it was vetoed. What we tried to do was show kind of the time value of money in construction. We're very aware that every day you don't build, it costs more. So we're trying to show you incrementally that hopefully this group can come to a decision and not have it happen over 4, 6, 8 years, because time is money. If you escalate this one out in today's numbers, it would have been 105 million instead of the initial 75 million. And then page 12 was just a rendering of that space. In 2012, what's known as the Pioneer site was also pre-approved for 4.4 million for level 1 and 2 and 3, and then canceled what I found on this. But if you're trying to put some apples and oranges together, 3.7 acres here, 250,000 of net assignable square feet. So what I mean when I say net assignable, it's not the closets, it's not the hallways, it's not the bathrooms, it's workspace. So as you might hear me use that term again as this group goes on. And again, 96 million would have escalated to 123. And you go on to page 14, and that was an early rendering of it. And then also 15. And then just lastly, looking at the Hirschler building construction, the original Hirschler 1981. If you look at that 27 million from 81 and you took it in today's dollars, that's 91 million, 173,000 net assignable square feet. And before questions, I guess my final thought, because this group will have to consider these, is when you're considering new construction build versus renovation. This works, but it's loosely 2 to 5% of your cost is site acquisition, and 30% is the building envelope, the site development, and the infrastructure. So if someone says, why would you go look at that old building if you got that building for 3 million and renovate it for 10, you're out the door for 13 instead of 25 million, and maybe those are trade-offs. So if at some point in time, I'm sure we're going to tour some facilities, either empty lots or existing, just to kind of keep that in mind. Why would we want to go into an existing building? Maybe you don't. When you hear everything everyone has said today, maybe it's just going to take too much to take that existing building and make it what you want to be, and then you say, but then tell me again why I would do that. Well, probably about 32, 35%. If you have a great building envelope, the bones are good, the site is good, you're already that much ahead. So just something to consider for the future. And I stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Director Vincent. Certainly, somebody's got some questions, right?
Yep.
Co-Chairman Hicks.
So to build on your last question and stuff, given the nature of the conversation we've heard here from the Department of Education and the requirements for that, DCI has some pretty specific, and then also looking at storage space for state engineer's office and some of the other. So when we get to this point, we actually identify all of these unique features we get. That would seem to be the first step to get to the issue that you talked about. Are we better to renovate? Or are we better to go to new construction? Is that a logical?
Absolutely. That's where you begin. You look at needs, you look at what those needs start to look like. I was glad that the whole group here asked a lot of questions. Tell me what that looks like, right? And then through that, you start to, as you might tour buildings in the next year or whatever, you start to say, I just don't see that fitting here. That still might not mean you don't chase that building, just maybe that agency just isn't going to fit inside this box, that kind of thing, because they're so specific. But that's what you look like. And if you start, that's what you consider. If you start to look at, there's going to be triggers in there, not just development and renovation code triggers, there's going to be code triggers. And if you start having to, bring in, negative air and all kinds of things like that, what does that cost look like? But that's it. The need and the space drive the square footage, which drives even the preliminary high level cost, which says it fits in this building or it doesn't fit in this existing building, correct?
So let's bring in the other concept that you said is time. So, the longer we delay, the more the costing is escalation. So that's the other component when we're looking at new construction versus remodeling into your process in your level 1 and level 2. If we're looking at, so explain the difference in time component from a standpoint of if we're doing a detailed analysis of a remodeling, does that take a lot more time versus just saying, here's the acreage, now go out and design the facility based on the needs of the specific needs of the agencies, versus looking at a building and say, well, now we got to go in here and see what the shell is, as you described, and the other facilities. Which one's more time consuming?
Director Vincent?
Under the level 1, level 2 process.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm glad you specified the end level 1, level 2, because your new build's going to take longer than your renovate. If you're looking at the overall time to put, first person in the seat. But the examination of an existing building could take just about the same amount of time as new, because you're going to get into real estate costs, you're going to get into availability of land. Our department is ready to hit the ground running. If it's existing building, we're going to want to know mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and MEP engineer to go out and analyze the building, and then structural. And then what it doesn't seem to be obvious of looking at the existing site, a civil will talk about how it's draining and what's going on. You can assume anything 30 years out is having some sort of issue with electrical load capacity, or plumbing starting to get tree roots and rusted out and corrosion. It's not to let you, not to scare you, you still abandon that and pull in a new line, but those are the kind of a diligence that needs to be done.
So, Madam Chairman, just kind of one other follow-up, and again, you keep bringing up, so the electrical component with all of the technological needs that we now incorporate into these buildings, I would think that the load demand is much higher than we had in the past. Obviously, that's something that's considered. Is that another big time constraint for looking at remodeling, or is that just pretty standard now? We look at it and say, hey, we know the demand's up. We gotta rewire the whole thing.
Thank you, sir.
Director Benson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're right.
That is to be considered, but it's not a timely issue. Right. So what we do is we want the advent of LED and what have you, buildings that are near end of life, energy efficient windows, LED lighting, they've been able to pull back against that end of life on the electrical, but it's imminent when you get over 30 years, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further?
Madam Chairman.
Yeah, we'll just get that all in right now. Any further questions, Co-Chairman Hicks? Representative Larson?
So question I guess I have, Jerry, is we kind of paint a picture of either we maybe identify a property and determine if it's got capacity and condition. And we kind of consider that in this whole concept. Then we're moving over here and we're saying we can design and build new to address current capacity needs and maybe some estimated growth. But is there any, so if I come back to looking at existing properties, I don't think is it fair to say that that conversation may be a little broader than just this looking at this building? For example, you could have a building that is adequate, maybe be pushing capacity, but sits on property that allows future growth. And I mean, does that have value, or does that count? Because I don't think it's just the building. I think it's the property, the whole property as we look at that. And then, so if you, then I've got a follow-up to that if I could.
Director Vincent.
Madam Chair, Representative Larson. So that is part of the whole analysis that we're doing. We're looking at, is it scalability? Is there something else that can happen on there? Especially if you start switching from a parking structure, which is very expensive, to surface parking. That's very important, is the added acreage and what it's used for. I would tell you that in addition to capacity and condition, before we start going out expending money on conditions and determining what today and past capacity, what we've heard, to me, it really starts off with the program, and if that programming needs of what we're hearing today, that has a lot to do with what can fit in an existing building. But property is still available. I've been here just 2 years in Wyoming, and we always have to consider property in other parts of the country I've worked in. But property is a big thing. The building might have this, but it might have 10 or 20 other acres in addition to that property. So sometimes in the past, what I have done is maybe a hybrid instead of a renovation of an existing and purchase, or a new build. And there's a new build if the property is there. If we find the bones of the existing wasn't that bad, and you build and then you occupy, you renovate the other one if it comes with the deal, plus if it has parking. So yes, acreage is important as well.
Thank you, Director. Follow-up, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And then I guess this is just kind of a procedural question as the task force maybe gets into conversation after lunch on is we look around the community. Is that something that you guys, is that Department of Construction responsibility to go out there and start bird dogging properties that might be available for construction, or existing properties that might be renovated? Who does that exercise?
Director Vincent.
Madam Chair, I believe that would be the State Construction Department along with ANI. I think Andrew and his team over there have a good feel of what we should be paying for rental space around the state and what office build outs look like. Am I speaking out of turn now? Yeah, we would work together on that, correct?
Anything further follow-up, Representative Larson? So Chairman Hicks.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, and I think it kind of headed the same direction as Representative Larson. And so I think we don't want to get constrained from a standpoint of a building when it could be a complex or a campus, or and that comes back to the acreage component. Just listening to the nature of the agencies and some of the testimony, you may actually have a separate building on the same property. Is that something that we've looked at in the past? I mean, right now I'm just aware of what you just went through, but certainly I think it expands the opportunities and addresses some of the issues. Was that something that if we make that recommendation, start looking at, that's all within something that could be done on the level 1 and level 2? It gets back to, I think, what you said, acreage matters.
Madam
Director
Chair
Vincent?
and Senator Hicks, absolutely. Acreage matters. I believe we've looked at an existing and a new build here. I know in my past 30 years, I do that all the time, especially if I'm nervous about an area or a region and I can't get a good feel on what its long-term growth is going to be. Instead of having a building that's 3/4 empty, to have two facilities and one possibly be leased out by us and be an income stream until things come around again. So I've done a little bit of all of that, and all that should be part of our consideration.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments for Director Vincent? All right, thank you. So it is 11:37. My thought, if it works with LSO staff, is there further public comment? We have time to take some public comment before lunch here. Anybody online? There's not. Mr. Butterfield. I should say Administrator Butterfield, if you would introduce yourself to the task force and then go ahead and proceed with testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kyle Butterfield. I'm the city administrator for the city of Riverton, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your investment and exploring the opportunity for Riverton and Fremont County. I'd also like to say that the city of Riverton would like to be a good partner with you. Clearly, there are capable people looking at this opportunity, and we want to make sure that we make our resources available. We have staff that I'm very willing to make available to help, and just wanted to express support for what you're working on and say thank you for the time you're taking today.
Thank you, Mr. Butterfield. Representative Larson.
So Kyle, one of the things that I think will come up, and we've seen it a little bit as we're trying to navigate through the new auditorium at the high school, is that there's perhaps some clarity on city ordinance requirements that maybe exceed statutory ordinances. And I'll finish this with the question is are you aware of any, but helping us to understand what those are ahead of time really helps us as we consider and estimate costs. So sometimes as we get into communities, we found that in Landert Life Resource Center a little bit, and as well in Evanston, and that there's some city ordinances that sometimes are just a little bit outside what we see in statute. And if we can have those available, or if you're aware of any of those, is it possible that as we move forward that we might have those in consideration?
Mr. Butterfield.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman and Councilman Larson. Excuse me, councilman's the wrong term.
Lloyd works.
I apologize. I just came back from Cody, so I apologize. I missed the start of this meeting, and maybe I'm a little road ragged, so I apologize. To answer your question, I'm not aware of any ordinances offhand that would be in conflict, but I do truly believe that the city of Riverton will work hand in hand with the state on this. We're very excited about this opportunity. I know our elected officials, without speaking for them, but kind of speaking for them, are very excited for this opportunity as well. As you explore sites, I believe this is where the city of Riverton can provide value. Clearly, you have a team that understands what the state needs, and we have an understanding of what our local conditions are. So we want to help in every way possible. If there are ordinances or zones that are in conflict with an idea that this committee has, we'd be happy to examine that and see if there's a way to work together.
Thank you. Further questions or comments for Administrator Butterfield? Chairman Nicholas.
So for example, if we purchased a building that is not sprinkled, doesn't have a commercial sprinkler system in it, that's privately owned, then what building are you under the 23, 22 building codes? And for publicly owned buildings, will those required to be, we'd have to go and renovate and put in sprinkler systems, things like that.
Mr. Butterfield.
Madam Chair, Representative Nichols, that is something we would need to look to. We do adopt the International Building Code. I believe we are under 23, but our Community Development Director is much more up to speed on that than I. And I think as we look at future possibilities, those questions should be addressed.
Any follow-up, Chairman Nicholas? Co-Chairman Hicks?
Yeah, along those lines, Madam Chairman, Kyle, do you guys have home rule here as far as electrical fire safety? Or you still fall under the state's umbrella? So some of the largest cities have their own inspectors. So where are you guys at in Riverton?
Mr. Butterfield?
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, we are under home rule. We previously had a building inspector that was a master electrician. Unfortunately, that employee had a different opportunity and will be moving on to greener pasture, or just recently has. And so we are advertising for a new inspector, and we do plan to maintain that home rule, but we know we also need to comply with what the statute requires when it comes to electrical and fire.
Thank you.
Further comments, questions for Mr. Butterfield? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other further public comment? All right. I was hoping that we might hear from Mr. Krasishnik. You would introduce yourself to the task force and then proceed.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the task force, my name is Kevin Krasishnik, Executive Director for ID Inc. ID Inc. is the economic development arm for the city of Riverton and the area. We've done a fair number of business-ready community grant programs. We've helped buildings, land development, the honor farmland, brought that into private hands. And so, again, like Administrator Butterfield said, thank you very much for coming here. We're looking forward to the opportunity, and we're here to help in any way that we can. Chairwoman has my contact information. And if there's any questions, I would stand for those. But again, thank you for coming to Riverton, spending the time here, and we'd really like to move a project forward here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krasishnik. Is there any questions? I know that you're also on the Wyoming WIDA. Tell.
Oh, correct. Yes. I'm also the treasurer for the Wyoming Economic Development Association and also help with manufacturing works here in town.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Kevin. Okay, and still nobody online? All right, well, I think it's an opportune time for us to break for lunch unless there's any other thoughts as far as further discussion before we break for lunch. No? That sound good, Mr. Richards? Okay. With that, I guess, we don't recess, we just take a break. Enjoy your lunch.